Okay, greetings, party people. This is a pre-introduction. There's going to be another greetings coming up. I started this video yesterday. Today's Friday, January 24th. But I want to do a little pre-introduction. That awkward moment when the forest fire forgets to burn the forest. So I didn't really cover this. I covered it very little. But what I noticed was Mel Gibson was talking, doing an interview, and they showed his house. And there were trees. There was video cameras at his house. The news was at his house, and they had some footage of his, the surrounding area, and there were trees everywhere. The house was burned down. It's harder to burn the house than it is to burn these trees. It's a dry area, right? It's a drought. And you see there's, in this picture. And then my wife came across these various celebrities. The things were being shared on the internet. So I wasn't the only one who noticed that these houses were being burned, but the trees weren't. So there are three other celebrities that they showed the celebrity's house, pictures of it, and the surrounding area with the trees adjacent to the property, some on the property, were not even showing signs of being burned at all, like not even partially burned. And so, yeah, like how does that happen? Like how does it jump those trees? So if it's burning in here and burning here, how did it jump this line of trees, right? How did the fire get from here to here? Like there's no pathway even for the fire. And so I don't know what's going on. There's going to be theories, and I don't give a shit about it. But, um, you know, it's very suspect, right? This whole thing. And then I was thinking something that goes with this last night when I do my meditation at night in the morning. Human beings are predisposed to doing things, experiments, any number of things, without realizing the consequences. And don't even think about doing what the consequences was something would be, right? So if you go to the West, I've been in various places in the West. I lived in New Mexico, and I went to California. Was in the redwood, the sequoia forest, not the sequoia, whatever it was, the one with the biggest trees. That's up 7,000 feet, and I drove through this California area. Like I was in LA for a little bit, but how dry it is in the desert. From I lived in Nevada and then in Utah and then in Idaho, right? And so there's a lot of these forest fires there. But a big part of the problem is people are living in places that don't have enough water for people to live in. They're places that the Native Americans didn't live in because there was no water there, right? And so people live near water. It's like 80% of people live by some sort of coastline, lakes, and oceans, right? I mean, you think about where all the cities are. They're, because of shipping things, people live by rivers and by lakes and by oceans. And so, people want water near them. But in our modern day water system, water can be moved through pipes and things like that. It's like, I won't call it a miracle, but it's one of our biggest technological innovations. And because of that, they have been able to do other things like dam up rivers and take water from aquifers and, wells and pump it out and all these things, our water moving systems. And we've been able to live in places like Utah, beautiful places. There's all this building going on in Arizona and Utah and Nevada. People want to live there. People retire there because of the climate. Some people do really well with the dry, hot climate. Older people, don't want winters anymore. And they have these places where they build things for old people, casinos and, golf courses and whatever. Golf courses, of course, take a lot of water. And there's never any thought about, you're using up the aquifer. There's this giant aquifer in the middle of the country. Forget the name of it. It's one of the biggest aquifers in the world, and it's half empty, right? Or more. That was years ago. And so depleting areas of water, damming up water, taking water that's going to other places, right? Because water, it flows, and if you take all the water in the north and it's flowing south, and the places in the south become, whatever they are. And then all the other factors that go in it, there's forest fires that happen regularly that prevent larger forest fires. And so none of that is thought about. We want to build houses. We want to have lawns. People want to have grass lawns like they had back home, and you can't have that out in the West. And so people use water in a way they shouldn't, and there's not enough water to go around. And Trump comes in and says, oh, we could do this and that. There's all this water that used to be here, but they're environmental things. But, it's the building of big cities and developments in places where people aren't meant to live. I mean, beautiful places. I was living in Utah, wonderful place. Throughout the whole, desert area, just spectacular. The colors and just amazing, and I look forward to going back there sometime. It's where my wife and I first sort of got together. And so it was just, it's a beautiful place. You see those, I share the pictures all the time from places like Bryce Canyon, which is probably my favorite place, and Snow Canyon, a state park, and then these other places out there. But there's a place by Las Vegas. One of my viewers has written like a book about it. And it's called Valley of Fire. Spectacular place, zero water there. It's a state park, and there's almost no animal life because the only water they have is when it rains. There'll be little puddles of water and rocks, but there's no rivers, there's no creeks, you go there, it's completely dry. And it's, this amazing stone and just beautiful views, and right by Vegas. It's like an hour and a half away from Vegas, an hour, 15 minutes. And those drives are like nothing out in the desert, right? There's just nobody there. And so, it's one of these things, right? But there's bigger things that we've done. So nuclear power. So depleted uranium has a half-life, I think it's 4 billion years. It's like 2 or 4 billion years. Really doesn't matter, does it? When you're talking about billions. And so you create the radioactive waste from nuclear power plants and whatever other nuclear thing that they're doing. It turns into something called depleted uranium, where the energy is mostly depleted from it. You have these rods, these rods that they put in these, nuclear power plants. And they, they're not as powerful as they once were, so they can't be used anymore, but they still are radioactive. Depleted uranium. They put it in these bombs. And, the containers they put them in, plastic, only last 10,000 years. And so plastic is probably the best bet, like cement, cement on bonds, which we'll talk about in a bit, right? And so you have this garbage now, and what do you do with it? Well, they've put it in buildings, like they substitute rebar for depleted uranium, and they've put them in buildings where now there's radioactive material in the cement, the concrete, and they put them in bombs, right, depleted uranium bombs that were used in Fallujah, and it just sits there for 4 billion years being radioactive, and anything that comes in contact with it, any animal, any person, people will build their homes over it, and they'll wonder why everyone's getting sick, right? And so now there's these dead zones where, this depleted uranium is going to be dumped, and it's going to be contaminating this plant for 4 billion years. Think about all the different civilizations. I mean, Earth might not even have life on it in a billion years, and we don't even know, but, whatever it is, right? But there's going to be life on planet Earth that's going to be affected by this poisonous, this contaminated material, because people do dumb shit and don't think about it. They made nuclear power plants, which is just a steam plant, right? They use these radioactive rods to heat up water, which turns a turbine, which makes electricity. So it's steam operated. It's creating heat. It's not very efficient in terms of it's not like you're using the nuclear energy to create power. And, it satisfies a need right now for all these, sheeple living in these, cul-de-sac generated, whatever cities or whatever it might be, suburban areas. But it's fucked up, right? You understand? Like you've created a pollution problem, but then you think about the plastic barrels they're in, and that we've created plastics, and plastics are wonderful. There's one of these homesteading guys, one of these naturalists. He has a big farm out there. I think I've still Turtle Island or something. I forget the guy's name. I think I'm friends with him on Facebook, or you follow him or whatever. He was one of these mountain men that they covered in that show, and he has a primitive living area. And one of the things he raised about and would never give up is these plastic buckets. They live very primitively. People go there to learn his skills. Young people learn to train with him. They live with him for a while, and some of them volunteer to be like whatever trainers, and they learn to live off the land and things. And he said, the one thing I wouldn't give up is these plastic buckets, because plastic is amazing in various ways. You think about all the plastics. We now know there are microplastics everywhere, causing phytoestrogens, causing issues with people's health. My son was even telling me about it. My son thinks organic food is worse than regular food because he watched some bullshit thing. I don't know, whatever it was. But he was talking about microplastics because, these plastics take 10,000 years to break down. And, they're contaminating the environment, right? Everywhere. And so there are issues with it. But we don't think about things like that. We think about the convenience of making plastic, and we don't think about introducing something new into the planet environment. We're just making more of it. And it was, pumping oil out of the ground. What is the oil there for? Why is there oil? What does the oil represent to the earth, right? There's these various cultures that believe it's like the blood of the earth, right? That it has some, the earth is a living organism in various ways. It's got soul energy behind it, right? It has its own path and own purpose. It's a planet, but it has, everything has to have soul energy. Everything has to have spiritual energy to create its material form. And so the earth has properties and it has functions, and we're just plundering it without knowing what the fuck we're doing. And so pumping oil out of the ground and then turning it into plastics and, carbon emissions and things, people are like, well, the CO2 thing's fake. Well, the global warming thing that was put out there by Al Gore and other shills, yeah, that's fake. But we're polluting the shit out of the sky. You can see it. We're burning these fossil fuels, and it's affecting things. We just can't do shit like that and not know how it's going to affect the world, right? We introduce things all the time. Because, this is the point of what I'm saying here is we do things without knowing how it's going to affect the environment or people. Or we know how it's going to affect the environment, and we don't give a shit because it's not going to hurt us, this generation. It's like, well, I'll be dead before the negative effects kick in, right? The other thing is like 5G, 4G, and electricity. Electricity, I talk about neurasthenia. Some Russian doctor discovered that telegraph workers were having emotional, psychological, and physical issues to introducing electricity into their environment. The telegraph, the energy that ran through the telegraph when it was first, one of the first things that was out there. And then, of course, electricity was pumped into everybody's houses. And then all of a sudden, these psychological issues, ADHD, depression, and things started to kick in. And, the use of electricity, where people didn't have it, now they did, plus the use of light. We now, our eyes, everyone has eye issues because there's too much light. Sleep issues, people are sleep deprived because the artificial light. We know what blue light does to people, and they, all these things that we now know. Issues that people are having with computers, and introducing more and more electric devices and more screen time. People staying up all hours of the night because, when they're supposed to be sleeping. Insomnia and all the things that go with these things. And then there's emotional disorders and psychological issues, living unnatural lives. So, there's just, I could go on forever. It's things I talk about here, all the things with these drugs that we use, these pharmaceutical drugs and other drugs, and all the things that are, chemicals that are put in our food and our environment. And there's just one thing after another. And they were done without any thought about what if this thing fucks up the balance, because people are screwed up in this way. We have the capacity to invent things and to create things and make things, but we don't have the maturity to not do them. Nuclear power being like a big one, and like the outcome of nuclear war, which is inevitable, and all these things that these other weapons of mass destruction, all the poisons and toxins we've introduced to the environment without any thought how it's going to affect our children, our grandchildren, and the animals and the trees and everything else around us, right? Because we suck in that way. And then once these things provide people a convenience and people get addicted to them and there's a lifestyle issues with them, they don't want to give them up. Then it's hard to stop them when the damage is being done. And you can't talk people out of it because they're like, well, I'm not going to give that up, right? I'm entitled to that. I was born with that, right? Like all this stuff, the selfishness that goes with it. And so this is what's dooming the people of the world, this capacity to create things that have consequences and side effects and not having the maturity not to use them. Again, this is a lack of connection to God, where the divinity within you says this doesn't feel right. You don't even have to know the scientific effects of something. Your heart would say no. This is what I'm talking about when you're connected to the divinity within you. Something tells you, hey, this would be a bad idea. And so that, like, being disconnected, being just hedonistic and mental and animalistic, but having enough mental capacity to create these things without the maturity to understand the ramifications of such things and be wary of them, and not just, let's just do it because we can, right? We'll worry about the consequences later, or not at all. We'll just go, and if we destroy the world, we destroy the world. Or just make it a lot worse. We could make it almost uninhabitable, which would probably be the worst thing, right? If you made it uninhabitable, then it would just be like, all right, people don't have to suffer here anymore. But if you make it almost uninhabitable, then everything that's living here has to suffer through the mistakes of human beings in the past. And there's going to be a time where these things, a time of reckoning, where all these things sort of kick in, and this place is a lot worse to live in because we fucked it up, right? And a lot of things aren't known. There's experiments going on, or people aren't aware of the side effects and the effects of these things, the after effects. There's no side effects. It's all there. And so when things go south, people just be getting sick, or won't be able to get pregnant, or won't be able to reproduce, or all these things that happen. And there'll be no explanation because they're not going to say, yeah, we fucked this place up. But at some point, people are going to know. Like, there's going to be the world's going to be shitty, and everybody here is going to be like begging God for forgiveness for being stupid. And hopefully there'll be some level of maturity and some, a desire to be better people, to be, more complete people. And that connection to the divinity within, it starts there. That's where religions have fucked us over, and that's where, all these things. And I'm going to talk about that here in this introduction. I have something else to add to it as well this morning, and then all the rest of it. So let's get into the original introduction here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm going to speed this up. You can see that the YouTube bots have gone back to their old ways. They've abandoned me to some extent, and they're doing these remedial one-word comments like thank you and no problem and bullshit like that. They've gone away from there, and I don't know, it's because I haven't haven't clicked on it. You can see here they're just going back to, they're not commenting as much, and they're going back to the way it used to be, where there's just a few words. And so, like I said, I've sped this up. But kind of bummed by it a little bit. Like, I was enjoying this. There seems to be one long comment I missed. I'm going to go find that. I didn't read it. I hadn't been able to answer comments. I hadn't been able to heart comments in a couple of days. And I wanted to, go through it as quickly as possible. There seemed to be a long comment there. That might be the one I missed. So I scrolled through it. But anyways, they tried this thing. And I don't know if they've done this across the board or they experimented on some channels or not others. I don't know what their deal is. But their YouTube bots were trying to give more sophisticated answers, and they epically failed. And they were getting goofy, and they were actually shitting on YouTube and shitting on Don Lemons. If you guys have watched my videos, know all the various things they said. And they used to give two 2-word comments, 1-word comments, emojis, and they've gone back to that. So either they recognize they failed, or they just maybe they found out I was shitting on them. But that sucks because it was kind of fun. It's like everything with YouTube. It only lasts for so long, and they always wreck the fun. And so, maybe it was a beta thing, and they're gonna come back with a vengeance. So hopefully this is not permanent, but they're just not they're not doing it. So, like I said, I was a little bit bummed by it, but I'll get over it. All right, so I got a few things to get to. I want to cover. I got a few Christian comments, people commenting about my video about what if Jesus' dream I had with Jesus was real, and I want to review that a little bit. Then I got a bunch of stuff to get to I didn't get to in my last video, a bunch of stuff about the pardons, some last minute Jojo Magoo stuff. He's the stench of failure is following him out of office. We'll get into that, and maybe Trump is going to go after him. We're going to see. There's some questioning about Trump talking about him, almost like a little bit of a threat towards Joe Biden, which I'll get into. All right, so that's the comments. Let me find the ones that were a little bit longer, and those will be probably the last ones I'll read for this is kind of an end to this little bit here. Okay, so this was the last long comment of substance. And the person writes, "Thank you." This is a person that regularly he leaves comments and watches videos. I appreciate it too. I also know that some things are just out of our control, and that's why we pray and meditate. Like, where do you get that? I mean, obviously they know that this channel meditates, but did they listen to the whole video? Like, where are the bots getting their information? There's so many unanswered questions. And the second reply was, "You got it." And so, that was the last one of substance. And there was one I wanted to respond to as well. So here's the other comment. It got a bot response. It was just, the bot response was, "Wonderful. Welcome aboard. Glad to help." The person writes, "Very grateful to have your clarity help my navigation. I've grown since finding you. Have not paid the mortgage yet this month, but when the house sells, I got you." Again, I've said this before. It should not cause you financial hardship. I would not want people to donate if they are struggling financially or just making ends meet like that. I mean, $1 or something, I don't know. People usually have $1 to spare. But I mean, in terms of, anything that's more substantial or long-term, that shouldn't create a hardship. Like, that's an old Mark thing. If people are struggling, if you're making less money than you need, then donating is not something you should be doing. But anyways, let me get into these comments here. And so this is the second of the two. And so I got a few comments from people who, I made this video about how if my dream with Jesus, that Jesus, was in my dream, and I told a long story about what that meant to me and what that means in the Mark system. And I had one experience with Jesus. It was a stream. It was probably around 2017. And I went up to Jesus and I said, "Do you want me to talk about Christianity, what my feelings about Christianity with, people who are Christians that are coming to my channel?" And he said, "Why do you think I'm sending them to you?" So, that was, I believe that to be true. But you don't have to believe it, but I do, right? But what if it was, right? Then that would mean if Jesus actually did come to me and wanted me to say these things, then these things have merit, right? These things have value. The Jesus remarks seem to be completely without knowledge. If someone doesn't understand the reasoning behind Jesus as a sacrifice for sins, then why would that person develop opinions and voice them? Are you shitting me, bro? Are you shitting me? The idea that Jesus died for everyone's sins, and because of that, it's the only way to get to heaven, has shaped the world all around us. It's caused Christians to go out and create manifest destiny with this idea of that they were saving people, that they were conquering and taking their stuff, right, enslaving. They thought they were saving these heathens. These people were all going to hell all around the world, and by conquering these people and turning them into some form of slaves and taking their stuff and robbing them of their culture and their own spiritual belief system, in many cases, which was superior and more evolved, is fucked up the world, right? Like Christians. So I believe that was supposed to happen, but the bad stuff that happened, the slavery and the abuse and the indoctrination, I believe that people were supposed to be connected all over the world, but it didn't have to be like this, right? I said in my last video, sometimes God allows you to believe something, or your soul does, because your ego wouldn't do it if it knew the real reason you're supposed to be doing it, right? If there's nothing in it for you. So people who went around the world like Columbus and explored the world were looking for personal glory and riches and fame. And if they were just doing this so they could connect other people and connect the world without any personal profit, they wouldn't do it, right? Most of the things that are done by ambitious psychopaths who have, a one-sided, a one-pointed attention to, can focus on one thing and accomplish it, even if the rest of their relationships suck and go to hell. And, they neglect their family, or they, whatever they do. They neglect everything else in their life, and they have a one-pointed focus with a killer instinct on getting things done, and without some idea that they're going to be compensated in some way, that they're going to be rewarded, they would never do it. Because they don't do things just because God wants them to do it, right? They don't do things unless there's some... And, society doesn't support that, right? The Queen of Spain's not going to give Columbus ships because he wants to connect everybody in the world. But this faulty belief by the Christians that they are somehow saving people, this rationalization, so it's okay to perpetrate crimes against these sinners and people who are going to die and go to hell anyway, was a shitty thing, and it's a big part of the whole problem, right? So that's why I would, or anybody else would, comment on that, right? Because it would be, if somebody doesn't understand the reason behind Jesus as a sacrifice for a sin, then why would that person develop opinions and voice them? What was said here about why would someone want to make Jesus suffer or continue to suffer is weird. Well, what's weird about that? There's zero about it. If you say you love Jesus, then you wouldn't have wanted him to suffer. You wouldn't want him to suffer for your sins, right? You would not sin so he wouldn't suffer. Like if all Christians or all people in the world didn't sin. I mean, based on your belief, like I said, it's bullshit stuff, that he can't die for your sins. But watching him in that movie and watching him suffer, and you're saying, oh, how great he is for sacrificing. And why would God want that? Why would God want to see his own son suffer in such a way? Would you allow one of your kids to be sacrificed, or a loved one, for the sins of all the people in the world? It's silly. You don't even want to pray for those motherfuckers, right? You don't even want to pray for the evil people the people you deem to be evil. I mean, and so what's said about here, why would someone want to make Jesus suffer or continue suffering, is weird. Maybe it's more of a mellow rant against Catholicism rather than Christianity. Jesus does not continue to suffer. Someone cannot die for your sins is correct, but God dying for your sin is reasonable and possible. So, first of all, we're talking about etheric life that is eternal. And death is an illusion, because it's it's a temporary situation that comes to an end where you incarnate in a body. God can't do that. Like God can't manifest in a body because God's already in every body. If God's in everything, God's the medium of all creation. It's a limited understanding of God, because the way that the Old Testament presents God as this wrathful dude sitting on a throne, like I said before, at that time, what did people think of as godlike people, right? What was the celebrities of that time? It was royalty. It was the kings. Kings were like gods, right? Kings were like the alpha wolf, the way your dogs look up at you, sees you as some kind of godlike being, right? Your dogs look at you as like a god. You're their master, right? This is the way sheep look at a Judas goat. Sheep know that goats are smarter, so they follow the goat, right? They're more evolved. And so, in terms of people at that time, kings were these exalted beings. And so when they talked about God, oh, God is the King of Kings. God is the celebrity of celebrities, right? God is the star of stars. Because people couldn't understand the idea of an abstract energy, right? An abstract divinity that exists within everybody. People don't even really understand the soul. Like some people can't really understand that there's a soul and there's, that animates your existence. So dying is nothing to God. Everything dies. It's a part of physical life, right? So death doesn't mean anything to God. And so God dying for you, which, couldn't happen, isn't anything. Like your physical death cannot alleviate something that's a spiritual nature of what you owe or what you have created for your future in terms of what's called sins, right? If you made a mistake, you have to pay for those mistakes. That would be the only equitable way of dealing with mistakes, right? That you would learn something from them. Maybe they're not mistakes if you gather information from them and you don't do them again, right? The whole problem is repeating mistakes. That's the whole problem with humanity. In the Sajmark system, there's 10 maxims, and the last maxim is about how you beg God for forgiveness, and you, in a supplicant mood, like in a very, in a mood where you're subservient, and you say, God, forgive me for doing this, and help me to never do it again, and I want to commit to never doing it again. Vow, let me read the maxim. I got to pull it up here. I used to have these memorized, but I've lost it since then. And now I've lost it again. I opened it up. Here it is. And so, at bedtime, feeling the presence of God, repent for the wrongs committed, beg for forgiveness in a supplicant mood, resolving not to allow repetition of the same. And so, I did this very intensely for about 3 months and had really wonderful benefits. And, it's what you're doing. The most important part is that you don't make the same mistakes over and over again. You can make mistakes because it's, that's part of your human experience. But making the mistakes over and over again and, committing to those mistakes and justifying them, rationalizing them and doing all these things. And those things have consequences. And everything comes with consequences. The good things you do, the bad things, there's a result of those things, right? It creates the future. You're creating your future right now. And so what you're saying, God can nullify the future for you, that doesn't happen. And it also minimizes people's personal responsibility. For most people who don't grow up as Christians and have some sense of things, they would never buy into that shit, right? Like they wouldn't believe it could happen. And so let's continue on here. It's too good of a deal. It's when somebody promises you something that you're like, I don't think that's really can be done. And, it's a bullshit thing. Someone cannot die for your sins. It's correct, but God dying for his sins is reasonable and possible. If the wages of sin is death, then there must be payment for sins. Well, you're going to die anyway. So why would God need to die for you and suffer for you if you're going to die and suffer anyway? People suffer all the time. Lots of Christians suffer when they die. They have cancer. They die of any number of things. They die horrific deaths. All of Jesus' disciples were tortured and things. And so they had things that were kind of worse than the crucifixion. So why did they have to experience that? Why did the disciples of Jesus have to experience that if he already did it? Like, why wouldn't you have eternal life then, right? Anything worth anything has to be earned. How much better is it when you earn something? How much better is it when you work for something? Things that come cheaply you don't appreciate, and that's the problem. Things that are given too cheaply. In the Sajmark system, there are shortcuts and things that are given just because of us. It's like a Hail Mary for humanity that's gone awry. That's caused problems, right? In terms of, people don't appreciate it. Like anything that's freely given. In fact, we can all connect to God. It's just that easy if we attempt to do that. If we pray to God, we meditate, we connect with God through the process of meditation and through our intentions, asking for God to be there with us and asking God to guide us. But most of the time, we don't want God to tell us what to do, right? We want to do what we want to do. We don't want God's input. I mean, that's the problem with humanity. People don't want, they don't want God to interfere in their enjoyment, right? Let's get back to it here. The payment is death one way or another. This would mean that the only way to rescue is of ransom and paying the penalty, fine, or whatever equating to death. You can take responsibility all you want, but it ends up in your death as payment. It's not payment, right? Your death is a liberation from this world. I mean, ultimately, what is talked about in heaven, you're going through all the miseries. I mean, some people really enjoy their lives here. There's some people who have really good materialistic lives. They're pretty much happy all the time, and they love life here, and they want to come back and enjoy it all over again. They don't see any need for the process of liberation, but the people who suffer do. People who are like miserable, and especially as you get older, your body's falling apart, and so the idea is that you're graduating to something higher. You no longer have to come back and experience life. But if you'd rather come back here and enjoy your life again, well, then, it's not punishment at all. Death is something where you're getting a chance to redo it all over again, right? And people who enjoy that, then they just, they're like a frog in a well, so they have to suffer. And then they're like, I get it. Let me get out of here, right? And so, again, it's just very, you're basing everything in your indoctrination, right? Not looking at the way other people would look at it if they were never indoctrinated in this, before this, for whatever this is, right? You can take responsibility all you want, but it ends with your death as payment. For those who accept the offer of ransom, payment by Jesus, his death is accepted on your behalf as a legally binding payment for your sins. Why would that be spiritual? That sounds like some legal contract. It's silly. And you're going to die anyway and suffer. Like, you're going to suffer for your sins. There's all these Christians who suffer for the things that they do wrong. You don't suffer. You've never suffered anything. You're like, oh, I'm suffering for my mistakes, my sins. You don't think any Christian has ever suffered since Jesus gave him this deal? It sounds like a good deal, but it's a bullshit deal, right? That's the problem. And so let me go to the second page here. Got to make it bigger. It was a two-parter. You take responsibility all you want for those who accept the offer of ransom. Payment to Jesus, death is accepted on behalf as legally binding payment for your sins. Otherwise, your death will be your payment in which you will be exiled into the outer darkness, as that is where the sin belongs, far removed from a holy God. This is why you can't talk to these types of Christians. Because that just sounds batshit crazy, right? Like, it's, that the sin has to be removed and cast away and you'll be purified. But if then you're not a sinner, if you're a born sinner, which is the whole theory behind this, this is what came from the original, Catholic was the original religion that was left by Jesus. What's known as Catholicism, and now has been, broken up into all these various subgroups of religions, right? And the idea is that you're a born sinner. And so that's, it's not that the sin is bad, it's you're bad. You make this sin. Anyways, like, there's nothing I can say about it. It's, if you're going to believe in that, you're going to believe in that. You aren't open to that. Well, maybe take a second look at it. You're not willing to do that. Okay, so this is the second comment, and my voice is starting to go a little bit here. Again, to what if my dream about Jesus was real? It's kind of amusing to listen to someone not understand Christian theology at all. Well, why would that be amusing? Right? Like, that's somebody coming in with this superiority that they're mocking me because I don't get Christianity, and I shouldn't be talking about it. I think Jesus came to tell you he is going to send you people because they struggle with it just like you. That's the silliest thing ever. Like, you either believe Jesus is in my dream or you don't. It's clear in my dream that Jesus was telling me that he's sending Christians so that they can hear what I have to say. That there's some kind of clarity coming from me for them. And it's not probably going to be all Christians. It's going to be the ones who are open to whatever has to be said. I don't know. Like, again, that's the essence of the dream, is that I said this thing to him and I wasn't thinking about it or worried about it, but it's what I said in my subconscious. And then either some part of myself in my own dream or Jesus' soul intercommuned with mine and said this to me, right? It's, one of those two things. Or I'm lying and I, whatever, why would I lie about it? But that could be it. But to misinterpret that, right? Like, so this is, you're interpreting my dream, right? I think Jesus came to tell you he's going to send you people because they struggle with it just like you. Wouldn't Jesus send them to somebody who gets it and doesn't struggle like it just like I do, right? Wouldn't Jesus send it to a believer and not a doubter, right? Or someone who is this again. This isn't believing in Jesus. This is the bullshit religion that was created as a power structure that clearly and factually has distorted Jesus' teachings, edited them, changed the story with a intention to make Christianity the only path that you can get to God because they want to have a monopoly on God. That's clearly what happened. People with non-spiritual intentions, power intentions, greed, and power, a need for religious power, created all these things in the Christian religion so that they could dominate your spiritual life. I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about the distorted teachings of the religion. It all makes complete sense that for a perfect God coming into this realm would be degrading and a huge sacrifice. Well, it wasn't a perfect God. Jesus had lots of human errors and had his own problems that he had. These things, some of it's been scrubbed, but some of it is there. Also, the sins aren't forgiven unless repented of. And of course, we need a higher, more loving intelligence like a creator to help us out of our mire. Well, I believe that, but that doesn't mean it's like a one-part thing. It's the divinity within each person. It's not, we're not disagreeing about that part. It's about the religion that's distorted these things to say that the religion itself is the gate, they're gatekeepers to your spiritual world. Pride being the original sin, all checks out. Okay, whatever, bro. In the Sizemore system, its power grossness is the most difficult grossness to clean. And power grossness is if you have a gift or ability, a God-given gift, and you don't use it and utilize it and share it with your brothers and sisters, it becomes the hardest thing to clean off. And it's a spiritual grossness that's cleaned in the Sizemore system, which I found very interesting, and that to me checks out, right? Because that's the biggest sin, is that you have work to do and you refuse to withhold, you don't fulfill your promise, your soul came down with a purpose and you were given some gifts and tools to help elevate humanity and help your brothers and sisters and contribute something to this world, and you choose not to use those gifts, then it's the ultimate, sin in that sense. And of course, ingratitude would be the other one. Anyways, let's move on to the Trump and Biden stuff and the other things that I have to cover here, Don Lemons and the rest. Okay, so I started to think last night, it came to me after I did this voiceover. I'm going to add something here before we get into the clips and the news and stuff like that. So when you grow up with something and it's just the way it is, it's what everybody does, it's what everybody thinks, it's just what you're supposed to do, these things that are passed out traditionally. Sometimes they're good things that could have been distorted, things that were appropriate at a certain time. There's laws and rules and things. They have these blue laws on every state government. There's a law in like Connecticut, you can't take your bear to the market, right? Don't bring your bear into the store. And which hasn't happened in years, but at some point someone brought a bear to the market and it killed somebody, and now they made a law, right? Things like that. So they have these laws that no longer, they're passed through the governmental process, state governments and national governments, that no longer are applicable, right? And things just, people evolve and change, technological development, knowledge changes. And they have these superstitious things that were passed down from generation to generation. Maybe they had merit in the beginning, but they become twisted. They become, they no longer have their place in society, but there's just things that you were trained to and indoctrinated in. Your family has certain things that you do, and you're like, you start doing them, and you start doing those things in front of other people, like, what the fuck are you doing, right? Because it's weird to everybody else, but your family, it wasn't weird, and it was just what your family did, right? And so you have these things that you're told. If you don't question those things, especially now, if you don't question your indoctrination, your upbringing, then you're boxed into something that more often than not has lots of things in it that no longer apply. I'm talking about the Bible here. And, you never think about, oh, yeah, that's fucked up, right? And so if you just go along with what you're told by your parents and the people that were running the system, and if your parents are fucked up and the system's fucked up, and you're told a bunch of fucked up shit, right? And so you just go along with it, right? And so what I want to talk about here is how this idea of Jesus dying for your sins is very transactional. And to start off with that, it's the fear of God. And so human beings, I understand why fear is used, right? Fear is used now. When our government use fear, or advertisers use fear, fear of humiliation, right? Fear of, any kind of thing that they sell you is like, if you don't use our product, you don't use deodorant, you're going to smell bad. And, fear of, these things, right? They use this fear of embarrassment, fear of, death, fear of any number of things, right? Fear is a motivational tool. And I understand why a religion would use fear, because the threat of going to hell is a very powerful thing, right? Well, first, let me start off by saying this. People have a relationship with divinity. Some people just have, some curiosity. I mean, I think everyone has a natural curiosity that gets beaten out of them. And some people are able to retain it. And then people think about God and think about, what life is about and these things. Existential questions, right? Existential. I wouldn't looked it up. Existential questions, right? And so you have this group of people who are seekers, who are interested in, they have spiritual tendencies and they're connected to God. And some people who are devotional and they love God, right? So there's some population that has that, right? And then a lot of other people, they have, some curiosity, they have a little bit, but whatever. And they're not really committed to it. And mostly they're worried about their mundane human existence. But what everybody ends up having is a question about what happens to me when I die, right? People have that. What happens to me when I die? You get in contact with death at some point. Your grandparents die, somebody dies, a person dies. For me, it was when I was in second grade, I believe, first or second grade. And there was a girl who was in my kindergarten class and in my first grade class. I don't think we spoke very much. Of course, I don't have very many memories from that time, but I know her name. It's Anne Marie Lopez, and the reason I know her name, that's one of the few people I remember from my, my early childhood. I mean, some of these kids were in my class, throughout elementary school, so I know them, more. But I can't remember all the kids in my first grade class. I know a lot of the kids that I remember from elementary school were in my first grade class because that's just how it was. There was like two of them, and so half the kids were in there. But the reason I remember Anne Marie Lopez is because she died of leukemia. So she was in my kindergarten class, and I think she missed most of first grade, like she was obviously being treated. And, maybe I knew that she was sick a little bit, but I wasn't sure. But one day my teacher came in and said, Anne Marie Lopez is dead. And I was like, holy shit, right? Like, I'm 7 years old, and one of my contemporaries is dead. Like, kids can die. It's like this thing. And it's left an impression. The first time I knew somebody who had died, right? Then my grandparents started to die and things like this. And so I went to their funeral. I had a pet turtle I caught that I left out in the sun and water, and it boiled, like this thing. I had this, I experienced death a little bit. And then you start wondering what happens to you when you die. Like, that's a natural human, human beings think about such things. People can contemplate things. And so you worry about, where do I go? What happens? And then you find out you have a soul, right? Whatever this idea that you have a soul is there. And where does your soul go? And so the majority of people who do religion, that's a big thing that they want, right? They want to know where they go when they die. And when you get promised of a deal, like you get a transactional deal in Christianity, you believe Jesus, you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you have this deal now, right? And so it's a fear of, where am I going when I die? And that fear is now alleviated, right? And so the fear of hell is also put in there. And so I understand why fear is a motivational tool, because let's say you're an employee. You got a bunch of people and you screw around with your fellow employees, at work, and your friends, and one of the group gets promoted. And then all of the your friends at work are like, oh, this is great. Our buddy's now promoted and we can now fuck off, right? And they take advantage of your friendship. They don't treat you like a boss, and their work production goes down, and then you have to turn in an asshole. And everyone's like, oh, you got a big head. You're arrogant now because you're a boss, but it's really because people take advantage of their friendship, right? And when you love people and they don't love you back, people will manipulate you and play on you and use your love against you, right? So that's one of the problems with human beings, that they have to be motivated, and they aren't motivated by love, right? The motivation when you love somebody is the best motivation. There's no force involved. You do things because of your love for them, right? You're motivated by love. And very few people can love God. Very people who can feel God's love. This is, borne out by the Sizemore system of transmission. And so they can love another human being if they're alive, right? They could love Jesus when he was alive. But it's harder to love somebody who's dead. If you loved them before they are dead, sure. You love somebody, but that love dissipates over time. The death of a loved one. You can really feel the love right after they die. So, the separation of love. And then it becomes a memory of love, right? As time goes by, you forget the person. They're inside of you. You remember them. You hear their voice. You hear their, whatever. You remember your times with them. But, those memories fade and, the condition fades. So, loving somebody who's alive is people do it, but it's not all that easy, right? People have trouble. Some people never love, or, they loved and they get hurt and their heart closes up, right? And so, loving whatever, your leader, your teacher, your relative, your parents, your grandparents, the love is a motivational force where you want to please somebody because you love them. You want to do things because you love them. So that's the ultimate, loving God. And God is love, right? But for most people, they're not motivated by love. They can't love God, and they can't even understand God. They don't have the ability for abstract thought. And so they need to be motivated by fear. So you create a fear like you're going to hell if you don't do our thing. When you die, you're going to hell. You're a sinner, you're going to hell. Oh, that's a problem. So you convince people of something. Now they're scared of that. They're scared of going to hell. And so they're like, well, how do I avoid this? How do I avoid this hell that you speak of, right? How do I avoid this eternal damnation? Well, you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. So that's where that story is, important. You understand it's a way to sell people something. They've created a market. You've created a need. People want to avoid hell when they die. How do I avoid it? Well, you just accept Jesus. And then, well, how do we know Jesus is going to take me to heaven? Because he died for your sins, right? They had a crucifixion problem because, they're talking about Jesus and his miracles, that Jesus could manipulate, is powerful. Jesus is powerful. He could manifest things and change things. He was, a miracle worker. And yet he died a brutal death that nobody would want, right? In a real masterly, savior, guru type relationship, disciple and guru relationship, you would want to be like your spiritual master. You would want to be like that person. But who's going to want to die like that? Look at Jesus' disciples. They all died horrific deaths, right? They all died these horrible deaths of torture and things. And it's a bad thing. It's an abomination. And why would God allow this to happen to somebody who's spiritual? So that becomes a question. If you become spiritual, is this what's going to happen to you? Am I going to be crucified if I'm like Jesus? So they had to make, it's not like you're going to be like Jesus, right? But really, that's what it should be. You should want to be like Jesus. That's the real spiritual evolution, is you love somebody and you want to aspire to be like them. He's your hero. He's the person you look up to. He's your standard. He's somebody that you should emulate, right? And people idolize and worship and want to be like a celebrity. People want to be a sports star, and they have posters of, this back, when I grew up, of sports figures on their walls, right? People that they're aspiring to be their heroes, or actors and actresses and famous people, or even, in some cases, politicians. But when you want to aspire to greatness, that greatness, you have to believe that those people have amazing lives. That when if you're in poverty and you become one of these people, If you're an impoverished person, you become a sports star, or you become a doctor, or whoever you're looking up to. You have to imagine their lives are a lot better than your life is now, and you're aspiring to have that life. But you can't have that with Jesus. Like Jesus, he died on a cross, being tacked up on a cross with everybody turning on him and humiliating him. The people that he served spitting on him, his followers and stuff. The whole thing, right? And so they had a crucifixion problem. Like nobody wants to see that shit, but they turned it into something powerful. That he endured this thing. He didn't have to, because he could have miracled his way out of it. He didn't have to, submit to this thing. He could have gotten out of it. He did it for you, because you're a sinner. And so it has the guilt and shame. It has it's a powerful story. They have this symbol of the cross, right? So they had to twist this story because no one wants to, see this thing and for what it is, right? That there is a power structure and a spiritual person who comes in and tells the truth, especially at that time in that place with that empire and that religion, the Jewish religion and the Roman Empire and the people of that time. This is how they dealt with you. When you were a threat to them and their power, which Jesus was, they kill you. And if you start talking about God in a way that is going to hurt the flow of business and hurt the, all of it, right? If people start following you because you're an inspirational figure, and they start being like you, then they're not going to obey the system, right? A fear-based system that's ruling over them, and when they no longer fear the system because they don't fear death, there's a whole, they have God on their side, then they don't submit to an abusive system. And so they kill Jesus, right? It's not only for his followers, but it's to set an example. If you guys start saying things like this, you become spiritual, this is what we do with you. And it happened to every saint in the Christian tradition. Go look at all the Christian saints. All the people are now considered saints. How they were treated. If they weren't crucified, they were canceled. They were ostracized. They were demonized, right? But later, like, oh, that guy that we beat the shit of, he was actually a saint. That person, that woman, that we were, any spiritual person in the West, in Europe, and, in the Middle East, in these areas, are, in America certainly, you're treated poorly because you're going to fuck up the system. And so this is why that happened. That when you become spiritual in a demonic system, the demonic system has to get rid of you in one way or another. Has to find a way to get rid of you, lock you up, kill you, embarrass you, humiliate you, or demonize you, smear your name, whatever they do, right? They have some form of they destroy you in one way or another. And again, I talk about India being such a pit materially, it's fallen on hard times now, and the corruption and all of those, but they worship their saints there. It's a good place to be spiritual, even though there's a lot of fake saints and people like that, right? And so, and speaking of India, so, there was these gurus in India that would do things transactionally. And so people would learn about various, I don't want to say just rituals, spiritual acts, spiritual, like you're getting a graduation thing, ceremonies that if it was done for you, it would give you something, right? Whatever it was, right? Liberation or, some kind of thing, freedom of your soul doesn't have to incarnate anymore, mukti, liberation, these other things, right? And the gurus would say, all right, I'll give you this for 20,000 rupees, right? And he'd be like, no, sir, I don't have that much money. And they negotiate it. Master Charji, third master of this Sajmark system, talked about this in depth. And they're not really performing shit. These rituals are goofy. They're just performative. They don't have any spiritual benefit. And there's a negotiation, a transactional negotiation, right? And so lots of people submit to this kind of, all right, I have this fear of death. I have this worry about what's going to happen to my soul. I have worry about these, whatever it might be, going to hell, whatever it might, your particular religion. And then there's a solution given to you. And it's transactional. If you do this, we'll give you this. If you, give so much money, you come to church, you do whatever, you pay the guru, whatever it is, right? It's transactional. And that's what this is, the Jesus thing. If you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you're going to heaven. It's a transaction. It's not based in love. It's based in fear for most people. The fear of God. You're a God-fearing person, but it's a horrible book, the Old Testament, where God's a prick. He's a narcissist. He's punishing people. He's sacrificing people. He's telling people to sacrifice their kids. He's doing all these things. It's not a real God. It's a bad book. It's a bad book aside from that it's supposed to be about God. It misrepresents God because God is love. God is in you, so why does God want to punish you? God wants to punish himself. If there's a soul in there, there's divinity within you, why would God want to punish and humiliate and do all the things that God does in the Old Testament as somebody who has himself in him, right? God's not a king sitting on a throne. God's an essence of love that's within each person. And love compels you. When you find that love within inside you, the love of God, and you start loving God, God compels you to be better. Love compels you, like not by force, not by manipulation. To compel you, you're compelled to please your people that you love, and the people that love you. Love compels you to do better and to be a better person and to be giving and loving and appreciative and being grateful and all these things. All the higher nature of the higher qualities that exist in your heart of compassion and gratitude and things. When you have a teacher like a guru is a teacher. You have there's a spiritual one, but any one number of those, coach and some these people, the ones that can inspire you to love them, and not out of fear, not have punishment and consequences. There can be discipline. Love can be disciplined. An elder who disciplines you with love, right? But when they're loving and they love you and there's love there, and you reciprocate that love, you will perform better. And then you not only learn what the teacher is teaching you, right, the lessons that you're given, but you also integrate the persona of the teacher, right? You save them, like their whole essence, the whole way you start saying things like they say them, like your parents. When you get to be a parent yourself and you start repeating the things your parents said. You loved your parents, you watched them, and you integrated them. When you are a good pupil, a good disciple, a good student, you integrate the master, the person inside of you. You have Jesus inside of you. Like you love Jesus so much that you start to be like him. You have Jesus you've internalized him, not only his teachings and his, some of the stuff in the Bible, like it's a book, but you can't get that from a book. It's a relationship. You have to have a relationship with Jesus, right? You have to, and of course, him being dead is really hard. Most people can't have a relationship with somebody who's, there's like I said, everyone has their own personal Jesus. You've created this imaginary Jesus through your own persona and your own what you think Jesus is, right? And Jesus looks different to each person. To a black person, he's black. To a European person, he's blonde with blue eyes, right? These things. But that's just the physical characteristics. But then there's the essence of Jesus. Some people see Jesus as a warrior. Some people see him as something else, right? But what about the real Jesus? Like his soul still exists. And he's not alive, but you could connect with his soul. But most people can't do that. So there's no relationship. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. They have a relationship with the book and the organization. There is no love there, right? It's transactional. Like you're getting something, we're going to promise you something, and you're going to give us something. And if it's like a scam, right? You give us something now, just like you're paying insurance. You're paying spiritual insurance. You put a, deposit down now, and we'll get you to heaven when you die. And, you can't sue them when you're dead, right? Oh, you guys fucked me, I'm not going to heaven, when your soul's like out of your body and you realize you got screwed, but your soul knew all along you were getting screwed, right? Your soul knows, like this, just some bullshit promise. They're promising your ego something that they can't deliver for. They're not going to deliver on when you die, right? Because it's not out of love. Like a love relationship between you and the divinity within you and divine beings and higher developed souls that come and incarnate. The master guru relationship is based in love. When it's based in fear and it's transactional, then it's failing because God isn't transactional. God doesn't have money. God doesn't need your whatever it is. Like God doesn't have to buy your cooperation. Like God compels you by love, right? It's your choice. It's your choice to embrace the divinity within you and to go to a higher level. But your ego doesn't want that. Your ego wants, to be satisfied and be relieved of the guilt, like you go into confession in the Catholic Church or whatever, you do in your different religions. It alleviates this guilt and suffering for your sins and things. And you're like, oh, I can do bad things. You have regret. You feel guilt. You feel shame. And so you need some way to deal with it, right? Through, spiritual promises and medication. You can't sleep at night because you're doing the wrong thing, right? What I say in the beginning, you're fucking up the world by introducing things that there's no plan and understanding of what damage it can do, or even worse, it's going to do damage, you don't care. And some part of your soul is screaming at you, turn around, you're going the wrong fucking way. You're fucking your life up. You're making bad choices. You're going to have to pay for these things. You're sinning, right? You're making your impressions. You're making these things, you're making a bad future for yourself. And you ignore that because you just want to do what you want to do. And so you need some way to alleviate that, through psychological medications, through religious promises, to nullify the stuff that the inner voice that's telling you you're fucking it up and you're screwing up your life and you're making the wrong choices. The things that you know that are wrong, but you're doing anyway, right? And so that's where religions come in. And that's, it's to give you a promise of something that alleviates some of the bad feelings you have from going in the wrong direction. Babaji, the second master Sajmark system, said religions depend on two things: temptation and fear. The temptation of something good, like heaven, a promise of something good, and fear, like the fear of hell, right? So this is how that all works, right? It's borne out by everything that you see. People have a fear of something, and you capitalize on that, and you extract something from that to give them a promise that will assuage their fear, right? Something transactional is not spiritual. Transactions happen on planet Earth. They don't happen in the etheric world. You don't get promised shit for doing shit. Like, you do things because you're supposed to do them. Your soul isn't burdened by all the things that make you susceptible to a transaction. Your soul doesn't have those things with it when it's not in the physical body that can be blackmailed or manipulated or be bargained with, right? And so this is all, a part of that stuff. Okay, so that's enough of this. Let's move on to the other things here. Okay, so I had two comments I actually want to address here. These are questions that I thought were worth responding to. The first one is this. Somebody says, thanks, Paul. With your membership videos, I am not able to leave the app and continue listening, and I can't turn off the screen or the video stops playing. This may be out of your control, but is there a way you can change your settings on the membership videos? That would be greatly appreciated. And I'm able to listen to these videos while I go about my day like I can with your normal videos. Other members do have the same issue. Do other members have the same issues, or just me being a dumbass? Well, I don't know about being a dumbass, but this could be, if you listen on your phone, I don't know if you're just using the YouTube app. One way would be to close the YouTube app. It has nothing to do with me. I don't have any settings about replaying the video. There's nothing there. Sometimes I have to take the YouTube app, and I have an iPhone, and push it straight up, whatever that does to close the app, and then reopen it, and then it works better. I have to do that occasionally with other apps to restart. People don't restart their phones often enough. Something like that. If it's a browser, then it might be use a different browser. I don't know. Other people can comment and see if they've had this problem. This audio is going to go in the Journey series too, so it'll be, the members will get two chances to listen to this. All right, so there's two comments here I want to get to that are of a spiritual nature. Okay, so I found the other comment here. I had to go back and get it I had to take a screenshot of it. The person says, this is Trump inauguration, gay extravaganza, more passion of the Christ, whatever it is. That's the partial title. Paul, at 9:43, how do I get this poison out of me? I pray often. So my wife just called. I'll get back to this comment in a second. So she was saying, Trump has been hammering the windmills, and Denmark has the biggest company that builds windmills, and when Trump hammered the windmills, it caused their economy. I mean, it's the biggest part of their economy. A big part of their economy is these windmills, and so their economy has taken a huge hit because of Trump's rhetoric. And Greenland. I mean, he made that comment about Greenland, and he didn't think Denmark really owned it. And he wants to grab it. Trump's a piece of shit, right? Because I know a bunch of these Danish people. They do the meditation, and they're really nice people. Like, all of them are very likable. I mean, they're in terms of the European people, they're probably my favorite ones. I know a lot of people from Europe because of the meditation that I do. And the Danish people, the second master of the system, Babaji, loved them. He went to their country. It's a small country, but they have a small ashram there. It's a country of 6 million people, right? Like the size of LA or New York or smaller. It's a very small country and nice people. And, Trump is totally fucking around with them. And they have a claim to Greenland and all this shit, like bullying them. I mean, he's just a piece of shit. Like, you don't fuck around with people's lives. I mean, it's an abuse of power. I guess he has some sort of a crypto coin that's gone up. It seems like a money laundering thing. So anyways, just thought I'd throw that in there. Let's get back to what I was saying here. So this is the comment. Paul, how do I get, at 9:43 in the video, how do I get this poison out of me? I pray often and some comfort, it's some comfort, but my darkness always comes out in me. I almost started a fight at a pool hall last night, but my friends diffused it. I don't like being angry. I don't know what to do. I think my face is the only thing that's really holding me up anymore, but I consistently fall short. Well, what I do is the cleaning process in the Sajmark system. The cleaning process in the system, there is the personal cleaning where everyone does a half-hour cleaning. You can use the technique if you feel like, you're getting emotional, like you're upset about something, you're rattled, you're angry, you're emotionally upset. You can sit down and do some cleaning. And there's the cleaning in the sittings, and there's 3 sittings in one day. There's the starting of the system. All the stuff on the Gratefullness meditation channel, there's a link to it. The meditation in the system there's a cleaning aspect to it. It didn't start off like that. There was just transmission given, but the second master of the system realized people couldn't receive the transmission because they were still full of other things, right? Spiritual grossness. And if you're not an empty vessel, you don't receive anything. If you're full, if your system is full of other things, then you can't feel the transmission, which is God's love and subtle. So he devised this system of cleaning through the process of meditation and using your will force to throw things out of your system. Whatever's in you, anger, anger has to be there. Anger is a natural, anger is a good thing to have used in the right capacity when it's necessary, right? Sometimes, anger is natural. Animals get angry, right? It's a natural thing. Fear is also a good thing in terms of its, both anger and fear can motivate you to change, motivate you to do better, these things. So anger and fear, they're of a lower order. Hatred is something else. Hatred is a human creation. It's not really an emotion. And so that should be totally thrown out of your system. In fact, there's a quote here. There is a picture of Master Charge. I'll put that up here. Whenever you hate something, look into yourself and try to find it and remove it from within. Then you will not hate anything anymore. When you're afraid of something, look into yourself and remove it from inside, and you will not be afraid of it. You will not be afraid of anything in this universe after that. And that is from Master Chargy. And so, you look inside yourself and you find where whatever is located and you throw it out of your system. That's a part of the cleaning process. There was a time where Chargy was going to be Babaji's successor, and he was working at a job. All the masters had jobs and careers, and he hated somebody at work. And he goes to Babaji, I just hate this guy. Look at him, I just despise him, I hate him. And Babaji said, you can't do that. Like, even if the guy's, piece of shit, you didn't say that, my interpretation. Whether the person deserves it or not, you can't indulge in that, right? Find the hatred and throw it out of your system, because at your level of spiritual evolution, he was on a higher level, it'll contaminate your whole system. because that's how it works. When you get to higher levels, you have to be more and more disciplined, and you can't allow something like that to sprout in your system. So, we have cultivated these things in this life and past lives, hatred and anger, and the cleaning process and the gratefulness meditation works to eradicate these things. Some things are deeper, it takes longer for them to come out. So I just had a few stories about this to say it's all going to go in the Journey series as well. And so when I went to my first gathering, I felt the energy going into the ashram, and then I immediately got sick and felt restless and miserable. And this happened at pretty much every gathering I went to 2-3 times a year for like 10 years. I would get sick on the way there. I would get, or if I wasn't sick, I felt emotionally, it was being sick, but also anger and fear and all these things. And it wasn't just me, all these people. And people would say you're going through a cleaning and you wanted to kill them because it sucked and you didn't. That was not the answer you wanted to hear, right? But it was true. That was the real answer because the stuff was being pulled out. The poison was being pulled out. At the end of the gathering, I felt amazing. Like the end of the gathering was always blissful, and I would leave on a totally high note. I mean, my first gathering, like I got sick, and I told these stories, multiple times. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I was restless, sleeping outside, a cold. We were in Atlanta in the summer, and I'd lived there, and it was always so hot. But we were on a small mountain, and somehow it was cold there. It was rainy and wet, and I only had a thin blanket, and I was shivering at night, freezing and cold, and sleeping in this tent. And I was sick, and I was feeling restless and angry, and just miserable and frustrated, and all these things. I couldn't meditate. I felt like shit. I couldn't wait to get home. I was like, I felt like I was going to quit doing the system. I mean, I felt so bad. I'm like, this sucks. I'm not going to do this. Like, this is horrible. By the end of the system, by the end of the gathering, I was so cleaned out, and the transmission was so, I was filled up with this transmission. And I felt amazing. I was like, oh my God, this thing's incredible. Because it's real. Like when people call what I do a cult, of course, the stuff with Dodgy and he's a piece of shit and he's done what he's done. But anybody who's experienced the gatherings and things, in a cult, they try to make you feel good and they lie to you and they, try to make it a community. And the master of the system is using that to extort money from you and these types of things. When the Sajmark system, you benefit and you evolve as a person, and it sucks. I mean, it is rough. There are times that it's really rough. The cleaning is not, it's not for the faint of heart. I've told many of the stories I went through in the Journey series. And then when I started going through the divorce and people in the system were ostracizing me, Master Charji had passed away and Daji had become the master, and it was before he, turned into a complete piece of shit and the system was still working. And I recognized that I had some anger and bitterness towards God. There are times in my life that I just felt resentful. I felt all this resentment and anger, and I just and I realized it was a resentment towards God. Like I had some past lives where I blamed God for things or whatever it might be, and it was it would manifest it in restlessness and frustration. And so when my ex left, and there was just a bad time on the material plane. A lot of things, a lot of stress, and all this stuff came up. And I recognized what it was, and I used the system. I got sittings, 3 individual sittings a week. I was going to group meditation where cleaning happens as well. And after about 3 months, it just got cleaned out. And I just felt amazing. Like my serotonin level went up. I was just a different person. That's when this YouTube channel really took off, and I started doing this full time. But it was like a poison that was in my system from past lives, resentment. And I had to go through it. It was tough to go through, and I'm not the only one. Anybody who's been in this system has experienced these things, and it's using the cleaning. Things get pulled out, and it feels uncomfortable when it's brought to the surface, and you have to recognize it. When I get angry now or feel frustrated, it's very easy to attack something that's right in front of you. If you get angry, like you yell at your dog or your family members or somebody who cuts you off in traffic, but I, look at it completely differently. Like I feel the anger and I'm just like, it's almost like I put it in a bubble. Like I can feel it, but it's not, I disconnect from it because it's not attributed to anything. It's just anger in my system that's being pulled up for one reason or another, and it can be, it can be launched at somebody like a weapon, and you can take it out on somebody else, and that's the wrong thing to do. Especially, like I said, the hatred is your hatred, the anger is your anger, the fear is your fear. Whatever it might be, whatever you're feeling is what you're feeling. Then you have the object of your anger. But if you only got angry at one person your whole life, well, that might be different. But if you're angry at people all the time, then you have the problem, right? It's not that the rest of the people, not that people don't suck and the world doesn't suck, but there's lots of people who aren't angry all the time, right? And so whatever poison a person has in their system is theirs to clean out. And so you have to utilize the system. And if you're motivated to do that, answering this person's question or anybody else who has these issues, if you're motivated, you see these things in your system, you want to change them, there's something out there that works, right? It's worked for so many of us. And the Gratefulness Meditation channel has all these explanations and all these various sittings and things there for people to do. Whenever I feel like something coming up, I do the 3 sittings in one day. When I get a chance to do that, that's always very helpful if I need deep cleaning. Or I can do it. Once I did those back to back, I did 6 sittings in 2 days. And so there's all these things. There's 3 sittings to introduce people. And then there's special deep cleaning techniques, once you've been introduced to the system. The introductory sittings are like, there's 3 days, you do 1 sitting a day, and then you can start doing the rest of the meditation. It's all there. It's all free. It's all for people to utilize. And, those people who have benefited from it, I think there's some people who have really benefited from the cleaning. I think, I've heard comments from people. Here on this YouTube channel, then, of course, people have done the system for years, right? And just one more thing about it. And so when I got back from India with my family, Daji came to America. And I was dating a woman. Like, I came back, and there was a woman who we were, we connected through my YouTube channel. And she helped me get back to America. Like, I gave her the money, and she found an apartment for me and my kids. It was very helpful. And the thing didn't work out for a variety of reasons, but she came with us to the gathering, and we were driving from Vegas to L.A. where Daji was. This was a real gathering before Daji really... in the beginning, there was still some remnants of the system, but Daji was already corrupting the system even back then, but I didn't know about it. And we were driving to the gathering, and she was overwhelmed by sadness and started to cry. She goes, I don't even know why I'm crying. And I'm like, that stuff happens. Like, things get pulled out of your system. And she said, well, how do they know I was coming? And it's a very odd thing in the Sajmark system. It happens automatically. Like, you'll feel restlessness, and sometimes you don't even want to go to the gathering. You freak out. People have panic attacks or something. Things like that happen. That's what makes it a real thing, because it's not just all some, blissful acid trip. Like, you have to pay for your spiritual evolution through this cleaning process. But anyways, it's available to people. And there's one more comment here. I'm going to answer this one quickly. And the person asks, here it is. It's not coming up. Paul, hi, thanks, Paul, for your work. I have a question. If you've ever talked about ascension part of the outro, blessings. When I say reporting from the apocalypse and the ascension. The ascension means something different to me than it means for Christians. That the system has to collapse, and then there'll be a spiritual renaissance here where, when I say, there's a saying out there that I used to use, I haven't used it as much lately, but the beginning is near, right? Something ends and something else begins. And so the collapse of our current civilization is supposedly going to give birth to a, ascension, a higher developed consciousness. And so that's what I mean. Like, it's the apocalypse now and the ascension after that, right? And both things are happening. Like, the apocalypse is opening the door for the ascension. It's part of the work and plan of the Sajmark system. Anyways, my voice is going a little bit here. Let's get into the other stuff. Okay, I want to start here because it's something I talked about jokingly like 4 years ago.
Biden ran and said he would never do preemptive pardons. It was an issue that came up when you were leaving in your first time.
He heard that I was going to do it. I didn't want to do it. I was given the option. They said, sir, would you like to pardon everybody, including yourself?
Including yourself. So I joked about Trump pardoning himself, right? Now, first of all, him saying, I was given the option. Sir, would you like to, like, what are you talking about? Like, you didn't need anybody to say that. I mean, you could ask people what you're, you know, because you don't know, because you don't really not a politician. Or well, you weren't then. You weren't, you know, you didn't know the rules, but I said Trump will probably pardon himself. Like I thought when he first became president, he'll end up pardoning himself. I used to joke about it all the time. As a joke, you know, but maybe it would happen. And then towards the end of his presidency, I'm like, maybe he really will pardon himself. And he ended up not doing that, which cost him these other things, right? And now this is coming up about Biden.
I was given the option. They said, sir, would you like to pardon everybody, including yourself? I said, I'm not going to pardon anybody. We didn't do anything wrong. And we had people that suffered. They're incredible patriots. We had people.
They were pretty patriotic, these patriots. They were the most patriotic patriots of all patriots.
People that suffered. You had Bannon put in jail. You had Peter Navarro put in jail. You had people that suffered. And far worse than that, they've lost their fortunes. They've lost their whatever, their nest egg, paying it to lawyers. And those people, and people said, and they wouldn't have even taken, most of those people, they wouldn't have even taken a pardon.
They would reject a pardon.
Went around giving everybody pardons. And you know, the funny thing, maybe the sad thing, is he didn't give himself a pardon. And if you look at it, it all had to do with him.
Hey,
okay, so you remember that Trump talked about locking Hillary up. I showed you this a number of times in the debate when she said, you know, we're lucky we don't have someone with the temperament of Donald Trump as president. And he said, yeah, you'd be in jail. And they were saying lock her up every, you know, gathering, every rally he had. And then afterwards, he's like, no, that played well before the election. I would never lock up the first lady. I would never discredit the presidency that way. And he defended himself later on. He said it again during this election cycle, that he didn't want to lock up Hillary because, you know, she was first lady and she was secretary of state and it would look bad for America. Even though she was guilty, he didn't want to do it. He chose not to follow the rule of law. But now he's clearly vindictive as fuck, right? And he seems to want to lock all these guys up. So the preemptive pardons were probably necessary, but he can get it all done by going after Jojo Magoo.
MJ, tell us what's going on, what President Biden is doing on his way out the door.
Breaking news from the White House, a statement from President Joe Biden issuing preemptive pardons for a number of individuals that he said he is fearful will be persecuted, politically persecuted. I just want to tick through for you the list of people that the president says he is pardoning preemptively today. They include General Mark Milley, Dr. Anthony Fauci. We also have members and staff of the committee that investigated the January 6th insurrection. He also said that that group would include the U.S. Capitol and D.C. Metropolitan Police officers who testified before this committee. You know, Jake.
So this is when he did the pardons. And Jake Tapper says something here. He goes after it a little bit.
This is was a possibility that we had anticipated and that we reported was something that President Biden was considering. And in all of our reporting, we anticipated that if he were to take this action, it was very possible that it would happen at the very last minute. And here we are just hours.
No, he had his own family to do it the last minute.
Hours before President Biden is set to leave the White House, the president is announcing this very controversial.
Remember, he said he wasn't going to pardon his son, and he did. So, like this was like he lied about all these things. Of course, they all lie all the time. They're liars. That's nothing new. I'm not showing you this because you don't know any of these things. Apparently, Jake Tapper gets pissed off at somebody here, a Democrat.
Decision. You know, in this lengthy
Biden.
statement that he just released, he says, I believe in the rule of law, and I am optimistic that the strength of our legal institutions will ultimately prevail over politics.
You don't believe in the rule of law, right? You don't believe in it, or you wouldn't do this.
But he says these are exceptional circumstances, and I cannot in good conscience do nothing. Now, when he is talking about exceptional circumstances, of course, he is referring to the incoming president, Donald Trump, who has made very clear in all of his public statements that he is focused on taking revenge on people, on individuals who...
Okay, so let's move forward here to where?
Out of legal troubles, knew that there was just a lot of hardships coming their way, and this is why he is taking this action, to make sure that he can save them from all of that.
I mean, if they go back and forth, Trump pardons all his criminal buddies and himself, and the next president has to do that, you know, if it's Democrat, and they'll go back and forth.
Even though he makes clear he does not believe that they did anything wrong, Jake.
All right, MJ, thanks so much. Let's go to Jamie Gangel now for more on this. Jamie Gangel, a lot of the members of the January 6th committee said that they didn't want preemptive pardons. They hadn't committed any crimes.
You can replace Jamie Gangel with a Muppet, like a Jim Henson Muppet, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right?
Didn't think it was necessary. But there is always just the question of even a prosecution that isn't going anywhere is still going to cost potential defendants up to millions and millions of dollars.
Okay, so I had the wrong clip here. This was a reaction video that YouTube recommended to me, and it started off with the clip I just showed you, but then this was a follow-up when he pardoned his family. And Jake Tapper, does his whiny thing that he does.
With these sweeping pardons that President Biden, former President Biden now, is giving to his immediate family. Preemptive pardons for his brothers Frank and Jimmy, to his sister Valerie, and then to, I think, a couple in-laws.
Their spouses, yeah.
And that, to a lot of people, this did not go through the regular pardon attorney, the pardon process. And Biden in 2020, when I interviewed him right after he'd been elected, had some very harsh things to say about the idea of Trump giving preemptive pardons to his family members. He said it would set a horrible precedent. Now, Trump didn't do it. Joe Biden did.
President Trump is reportedly considering a wave of preemptive pardons. Does this concern you? All these preemptive pardons?
Well, it concerns me in terms of what kind of precedent it sets and how the rest of the world looks at us as a nation of laws and justice. You're not going to see...
Yeah, he's pretty senile back then even, right? So then this happened.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. President, the security detail for Anthony Fauci was terminated last night, and I'm wondering if you have any comment on that.
About what?
The security detail for Anthony Fauci was terminated last night, sir. Do you have a comment?
No, I think, when you work for government, at some point your security detail comes off. And, you can't have them forever.
Now that he's pardoned, we need some vigilante justice.
So I think it's very standard. If it would be for somebody else, you wouldn't be asking the question. The question is very fair. But, you work for government. We took some off other people, too. But you can't have a security detail for the rest of your life because you work for government.
And we work for Big Pharma.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Would you feel partially responsible if something were to happen to, say, Dr. Fauci
No.
or John Bolton?
No. They all made a lot of money. They can hire their own security, too. All the people you're talking about, they can go out. I can give them some good numbers of very good security people. They can hire their own security. They all made a lot of money.
Off of the pandemic and the wars.
Fauci made a lot of money.
Yeah, he did.
They all did. So if they, felt that strongly, I think that certainly I would not take responsibility.
As much as Trump is a piece of shit, I really am all in for this vindictive going after all these people thing. I'm enjoying it right now, and I'll continue to enjoy it.
Presidential party and members of Congress and whatnot, the hoi polloi of Washington for the most part, went up to Washington's National Cathedral for a national prayer event. And there at the lectern was Bishop Marianne Edgar Bood, and she gave a sermon that, you know...
Okay. What do you think Marianne's deal is? Just, going off of appearances alone.
It's described as a sermon, but really it was a lecture where she told the new president, go easy on migrants and refugees and members of the LGBTQ community. If you missed it, it's gotten a lot of support in some quarters and a lot of criticism. Here she is.
I ask you to have mercy upon the people
What's happening with Tiffany Trump here?
in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops.
Okay, so fearing for their lives is not anything that Trump could do anything about. I mean, Trump's rhetoric is going to be his rhetoric, but if anything, it's going to release the pressure valve of something that's been building now for a while, right? By a power grab that happened that most Americans weren't on board with, right? And so if Trump, his saying in the federal government there's only two genders, right? That's going to release the pressure valve to whatever extent and get rid of the anger and animosity of people who feel like this belief system's being forced on them. Look at J.D. Vance here, right?
Crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals. They may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
Oh my God!
It's always good to learn. What was that, John, or was that Paul?
I don't know. She didn't go through scripture. Okay,
Right.
And she gave a political speech.
Absolutely.
And as someone that comes from generations of preachers, I would have walked out. I commend the president for being graceful, but I'm J.D. Vance. I'm looking crazy. Like, what is she talking about doing a sermon? I don't think it was the appropriate time. If you had something to say to the president that may be a little political, if you wanted to talk about the president.
Okay, so they go on. At some point, the president responded here. Okay, so they don't have Trump saying it. I'm not sure where it comes from, but Trump urges woke bishop to apologize after viral tirade. See, this is the problem with religions. Like I said, like which one's the right one? The one that you believe in or the one that somebody else believes in? This is obviously a liberal bishop in a liberal part of the country, Washington, D.C., and I don't know how this Trump ends up here. Let's listen a little bit more to these Fox News people talk about.
Appropriate time. If you had something to say to the president that may be a little political, if you wanted to talk about the president exercising mercy, then you could have asked for the president for a few minutes of his time and said, Mr. President, this is the issue that I feel. But don't get up there and try to preach a sermon that you cite no scripture for.
Well, she's not going to talk to him because during the George Floyd riots back in 2020, she said she'd given up trying to speak to Trump and said that he needed to be replaced. So,
Look at the children. There's children there, too, that are hearing this message.
Well, here's the thing. The president's team should...
All right. The president's team should have vetted this person, they're saying, which they should have, unless this is done intentionally. And so the only reason she would do this dude here would do this is for a viral moment. And I'll show you. She goes on Rachel Maddow, which popped up organically. I didn't search for it, but she did, which is an obvious destination for her, right? She ends up on Rachel Maddow's show. And the reason she would do this is for a viral moment, because everybody knows that this is going to have the opposite effect. By saying shit like this to Trump, it will trigger him, right? We all know this. Unless Trump's acting, which, he's really not, he gets triggered. We all know he gets triggered. And his reaction is always to go in harder on whatever group of people that you're supposed to defend, right? And so he's taking a hard line in immigration, whatever the LGBTQ stuff is. And now he is going to go in harder on that because you've provoked him. Because he's like a little child. And he has his little tantrums. And so he's not going to listen to you. When has Trump listened to criticism? Show me one time Trump has listened to criticism and he's taken the criticism and he's changed because of it. It's never happened. And so if you're pleading with him to do that, you see his obvious reaction, the reaction of the family, and the reaction, post-reaction, the reaction of Fox News. So the only reason you would do this is for your own benefit, because it's not going to benefit the groups of people you're trying to defend here, right? We all know, she knows what Trump's going to do, right? So let's go to the Rachel Maddow thing.
They may not be citizens.
Yeah, we saw this already. Let's go to here.
That was the Episcopal Bishop of Washington yesterday at the National
Episcopal
Cathedral talking directly to the
She
president.
was being totally Episcopal.
Directly, eye to eye, about compassion, humility, kindness.
Like you guys all did with anti-vaxxers, right?
Honesty, honoring the inherent dignity of every person, talking to him about respect, about mercy. This is not his usual bailiwick. It is hers, though. Joining us now is the Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Buddy. She's the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C.
Look at that dude.
Bishop Buddy, I really appreciate you making the time. I know you have a lot of options.
Say Bishop Buddy?
Where to be, and I appreciate you being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
What made you decide to...
Marianne Edgar Buddy. Marianne Edgar Buddy.
Make that appeal the way you did, to ask him for mercy in that way?
Well, as you summarized so well, as I was thinking about at the end, toward the end of my preparation, the pillars of unity, it struck me that I was missing one, and that last one was mercy, to have mercy and compassion. And rather than state it in sweeping terms, I thought I would acknowledge to the president, that he had come to the highest office of the land, that he had millions of people had entrusted him with this power. And I wanted to make, as you heard, a plea, a request that he broaden his characterization of the people that are...
Okay, bullshit. You wanted to have a viral moment. You wanted to go on Rachel Maddow. You wanted to be celebrated by the liberal community. Because everybody fucking knows, like I said, Trump doesn't listen to criticism. We all know Trump is a known entity. There's things that we don't know Trump is doing in terms of he talks shit and we don't know why he's talking shit, right? Sometimes he's pushing for something. Sometimes he's negotiating something, like the thing with the windmills in Denmark and Greenland, things like that. We don't know. Sometimes you don't know what Trump's going to do. Sometimes Trump doesn't know what he's going to do. But we do know when Trump is criticized, it happened with Rosie O'Donnell, and then all the other times, all these battles he's had, and late night in Twitter going after people, he gets petty. And we know from The Apprentice, if you ever watched The Apprentice, he loved it when people would go back and forth at each other like children and, have insult battles and, in the boardroom. He loved it. Like, he thought that was good television, and it was good television. He pushed for it. And he was like, oh my God, you're losing this. It's all about winning the argument and who can go lower. And Trump's willing to go down in the, it's very insulting. He's very, all these things. And so we know how he responds to criticism, right? And the only reason to do this, because then we know he's going to react negatively to the groups that if he didn't, some of these things aren't personal. Like, I don't think Trump really cares about immigrants, right? because immigrants are necessary, even illegal ones, to do jobs like agricultural work and all these other jobs that Americans don't want to do. People don't want to say that. The immigration problem is more a problem of hiring people and people who don't want to pay Social Security tax and insurance and things and want to hire people and pay them under the table. And it's lots of rich people. Trump has done it, and Trump's buddies have done it. People do this in the South and the areas that are Republican areas. Lots of Republicans hire illegal immigrants to do labor for them. It's cheap labor. They don't have to pay all the other bullshit that they have to pay regular workers, right? And so this is a much bigger problem than they're letting on. But the Democrats stole Trump's election, whatever they did to him. They worked him on COVID, and they rigged the election. Joe Biden, they rigged it against Bernie Sanders, or they rigged it against Trump. Whatever happened there, that going after Trump the way they've gone after him. And Biden made a mistake. The Democrats pushed so much for this idea that Trump himself put himself out there as an immigrant villain, the villain to illegal immigrants, like a boogeyman. And so as soon as Trump was out of office, and the Democrats pushed this, that Trump was inhumane, he was breaking up families. And so as soon as they got him out of office, the immigrants said, well, this is our window. And so they descended on the democratically friendly immigration policies because they didn't know whether Trump is going to get back in or not. Remember that first spring after Biden was sworn in, and there was this massive amount of immigrants heading towards America because they knew that this was their opportunity. And Biden opening the borders more than Trump did became this huge problem for most Americans who were freaked out by it, pushed by Tucker Carlson and these other people. And it was a devastating issue for Kamala Harris, right? We all know that. And so Trump, I don't think he really cares that much about the immigration problem. He just was talking shit about it because he knew his followers, his people, the Republicans, it was an issue for them. But now you've made it personal to him, right? By mocking him. And all the people who are saying you can't do this, they're just going to make Trump go harder because that's what he does, right? And so this whole thing is on the Democrats in the sense that they provoked this in Trump, right? By the way they, Trump is an asshole. He did this to himself. I mean, he's willing to hurt other people for his own, benefit. Trump's shown that over and over again. Treat people like cattle, like Trump will totally do that. But you've provoked this reaction, especially by criticizing him, right? And doing that and kind of humiliating him or embarrassing him in front of all of his family. I mean, that wasn't done for any other reason but for you to go viral. There's no benefit in it. There's zero things that's going to happen that's going to make him show mercy. Trump is not somebody. When has Trump showed mercy to somebody who criticized him? Trump might show mercy to somebody who kisses his ass. I mean, he might lift somebody up or help somebody out. But somebody who's attacking him, he's not going to show any mercy. He prides himself on having a killer instinct, right?
Are frightened now and are at risk of losing everything. And I thought that that would be the more respectful way to say it, and also to appeal to not only the president, but to all who might be listening, to appeal to what we know to be true about our immigrant neighbors, who they are, the kind of people that we're blessed to be among.
Okay, do you think Trump was going to go, you're right? Do you think anybody would say, you're right in this climate, right? This is there's a joke done by let me see if I have the clip here, by Brian Regan.
Hey, I saw something interesting today on social media. Somebody posted a very strong political opinion, and somebody replied, "Good point, I changed my mind." No, I'm sorry. I saw a unicorn. I saw a purple, glittery, flying unicorn.
And to remember them in our understanding of what it means to be America.
Your opportunity in that moment to minister directly to the president is...
Oh, shit. Is that what you call that, ministering? Why don't you ask her the real question? what did you think Trump was going to do with this? Trump's demanding an apology from you. He's now triggered. What do you think what do you think the effects are? I've said this with protesting. This was a use of force. This is Joe Biden glomming all over kids because their parents are being sworn into the, to the Congress, the Senate, right? When you use your position and you use your platform to humiliate somebody, and she had Trump sitting there as his captured audience, right? And so we know what's going to happen, right? So ask that question, Rachel. They have similar haircuts.
Unique moment. I know that you've been the bishop in Washington for a long time, and you were there for his first inaugural as well. But I wanted to ask about the broader question of the role of the church right now in moral leadership in this moment. We have seen the Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church, elements of the Lutheran Church, other congregations all over the country, very diverse types of churches, offer themselves, for example, as sanctuaries for people who are facing deportation. What do you see as the role of the church in
You mean illegal people here illegally? And again, I don't, immigration is a difficult issue. The people you can't blame are the immigrants, because they're coming from shit lives looking for better lives. Maybe some of them are criminals, maybe they're not, whatever it is, right? And so the reason they're coming here is people will hire them and they'll be given a better life. And, the Democratic Party, Biden did whatever he did. It's a little unclear to me how much that's Republican rhetoric, how much it was the Biden administration, kind of a mixture of both of them, right? But either way, this idea that you would give sanctuary to them when the majority of people who are going to church are with Trump on this, right? The people who are church-going people, for the most part, are not into immigration, And so it's silly to make it sound like the churches are against Trump on this. But anyway, so this happened.
This is a Fox News alert, and a pretty historic one at that. President Trump has revealed the context of the letter that former President Biden left to him.
You mean contents?
This is a Fox News exclusive, and let me put this into
It's an exclusive. They got this epic letter written by Biden to Trump.
Perspective. There have only been 7 presidents that left a letter to their predecessors, 6 who left a letter to the opposite political party.
Remember that there's a joke that a president comes into the Oval Office and there's 2 letters, and there's one for the first time you get into a crisis. It's from the former president, and there's another one when you get into your second crisis, right? And the first letter says, so the president new president comes in, goes through his first crisis, and the letter says, blame everything on me. Blame everything on your predecessor. And then he does that, and the crisis goes away, and there's a second crisis, and the crisis says, and then he goes and reads the second letter, and it says, write 2 letters, right? I think that's from the West Wing. I'm not sure where I heard that. But anyways, this is something that people thought was, that was done a lot. It's not. But it's not historic, right? Just because it's only been done a couple of times.
And Biden was just the 3rd to have to pen a letter to someone who was a political opponent, in this case, a former political opponent. This is history, and we at Fox News have the content of this letter. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-host, Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Cheryl Casoni, Fox Business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business. Jerry Willis, Fox Business correspondent, and Ben Ferguson, host of the Ben Ferguson podcast and co-host of Verdict with Ted Cruz podcasts. Well, we begin with Peter Doocy. He's live on the White House lawn. And Peter,
Doocy, what do you got,
this is only the 3rd time in our history we have a letter.
It's historic. I mean, it's crazy. Only 3rd time this has happened.
Exactly like this one. What does it say?
And Kayleigh, we saw the other night on Monday, just a few minutes after President Trump returned to the Oval Office, I asked him if the president left him a letter. He hadn't checked yet. He opened up the drawer. We were only able to see the outside of the envelope.
No way, Peter. No way. Well, the outside.
Said 47. We can report now for the first time.
I think Peter's taking a couple of trips to the YMCA.
Anywhere in the world, this history-making text
Peter.
Of what it said on the inside. The letterhead was of Joseph R. Biden Jr.
No way. Do you use its own letterhead?
President of the United States, and his cursive handwriting that I reviewed was difficult to read at times. But
yeah, because he's got Parkinson's and all.
This is what I got from the letter. Let's read it together. Dear President Trump, as I take leave of this sacred office,
sacred.
I wish you and your family all the best.
Remember the time Bill Clinton inserted a cigar in Monica Lewinsky in that sacred office?
In the next 4 years, the American people and people around the world look to this house for steadiness in the inevitable storms of history. My prayer is that in the coming years will be a time of prosperity, peace, and grace for our nation. May God bless you and guide you as he has blessed and guided our beloved country since our founding. Joe Biden, 1/2025.
Boom. All right. So, everyone knows Trump's going full Trump. We didn't get full Trump the first term because he said on his interview with Joe Rogan, he couldn't appoint his own people. There was no Trump people. Like Trump ran without Trumpers in the Senate and without Trumpers in the House of Representatives. There was a few people who were kind of into Trump that won elections, but Trump didn't have his own people. And he didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He was new to politics. He had no idea how to navigate Washington, D.C. And if you remember the last debate, and a lot of people agreed with me, Trump seemed to be mailing it in. Like Hillary was winning in the polls, and it seemed like he was just doing this for a publicity stunt. And he kind of gave up. He quit on the last debate. Like he thought the debate, he was just sort of let Hillary walk all over him. He sort of was like, resolute, and is just not resolute, but he was resigned to just, all right, I had a good run here. But it seemed like he didn't even care about winning. And then he won, right? And I think he went into the election thinking he was going to lose. And then he was pretty passive when he won. Like he criticized the intelligence community. They started to go after him, and there were some other things that happened. And so, he really didn't find any sort of groove in the initial part of his presidency. And he was hamstrung because he didn't have, like this was another thing that came out of the Joe Rogan interview, where he said that if you ran as independent, you couldn't get anything done because both parties would be trying to go after you. And so you needed to have half the House and half the Senate and other people in government. And Trump now has that. He has the backing of the American people. We have a post-democratic debacle in Joe Biden, a senile president, and he's going to go full Trump. He's angry. He's bitter. He's not running for re-election, and he doesn't have much more time on this earth. He's going to go full Trump. And everybody fucking knows it. There's nothing stopping him from going full Trump.
Looking around the office, we noticed some changes from the way the Biden had it set up. Can you confirm that you have added back the Diet Coke button?
I think first of all, I just got here. So my people came in. They have extraordinary decorator sense, right? Let me just see some of the pictures. That's a good one. I could live with him. I could live with George Washington, I can tell you. I could live with Thomas Jefferson. I could live with most of them. They took a very safe route. They don't have any bad ones up there.
Withdrawing from
What is this one?
Withdrawing from the World Health Organization, sir.
Ooh, that's a big one.
There's two things going on here. One, he has a Diet Coke button where he hits the button and he gets a Diet Coke at the same time withdrawing from the World Health Organization. And that, is costing America a lot of money, more money than it's costing China. So Trump might negotiate back in at a lower price. It's like we pay $100 million or something, and China pays 33, something like that, right? I don't know what it was. Whatever it is, we're paying a lot more in China, and Trump isn't having that. And of course, the whole debacle, the COVID debacle, that lots of people are upset about. But the thing about this is, he's drinking Diet Coke, right? it's one of the worst things for you. And then, he was talking about, that guy Kelly Means was talking about Casey and Kelly Means were talking about Trump, understanding childhood obesity. Drinking soda at some point, you got to realize it's fucking horrible for you. And he's, and maybe he's stopping doing that. He's not going to say that. He's got the cigars on his desk. It's, he's still in pretty good shape for someone his age. He's better than Biden is. But, that's not proper diet.
So we paid $500 million to World Health when I was here, and I terminated it. China with 1.4 billion people. We have 350 to pay. We have nobody.
So in my estimation, Trump is he's doing a lot of radical things. And some of them are good things. I'm mostly happy about what's happening. I know he's a piece of shit, and I know he's, what he's doing to like Denmark, and, he'll do things to people, and he's probably going to be responsible for World War III when it comes to it. But that has nothing to do with him. That's just inevitability. That's just stuff that's going to happen one way or another. And he's just going to be the catalyst. But he's going full Trump, and that makes things entertaining, right? In terms of just me watching a show, and the censorship is getting better. And so whatever black cloud that YouTube and Facebook were putting over social media and Twitter before Elon got there, that seems to be lifting, and we'll see what happens with all that. But it is entertaining.
If we did that, I think they'd approve it.
President Trump, you've seen the other living presidents a couple times in the last few months. If you ever had to call on one of them for advice about anything that's going on here, which one would you call?
It's an interesting. Well, I thought Bill Clinton was a very good politician. I don't think he was used properly. I think they disrespected him. When Hillary was running, he came back and he said, you better get up to Michigan and Wisconsin. You remember that, Peter? Every house has a Trump sign on it. And they all laughed at him because the Republicans hadn't won Michigan or Wisconsin for decades, long time. And they all laughed at Bill Clinton. Like, the hell does he know?
He's just Bill Clinton. He's not Hillary.
And he turned out to be right because I won both of them. And then
Boom.
we just...
how it comes about Trump? So what would you ask Bill Clinton for advice?
Won both in this election, too. We won Wisconsin and Michigan and every other swing state. We won all the swing states. All 7. They talked about 7 swing states.
We won them. I did. What was the question?
We won them all.
We won them all. We won. I was me. I did really good. Remember, I did really great this time.
So, but Bill Clinton he had a great political sense, I think.
You looked like you were having a good conversation with President Obama at President
I
Carter's.
was. And you'd like to know what it was? Oh. Everybody wants to know.
See, that's Trump as a showman. He's just good at that shit, right?
Sir, is a declaration of a national energy emergency.
So you also
That's a big one. You know what that allows you to do? That means
Drill, baby, drill.
you can do whatever you have to do to get out of that problem. And we do have that kind of an emergency.
President Trump, at some point...
I'm not bullshitting just so I could destroy the environment. Destroying the environment is one of my things. That it's kind of the two things is bullshit wars, that bother me, and destroying the environment, because we're fucking over the next generation of everything in terms of our pollution, and we're not happy people. We're stuffing our fat fucking faces, our ghoul holes, with resources and shitting them out, all over the place with pollution. And, we're not happy about it. We're miserable fucks, for the most part. And people are, I'm happy. I'm like, I don't look happy, but I am happy. But, I'm grateful for all the things. I'm really aware of what are luxuries, that we have, right? And, at the cost of, we might as well enjoy them. If they're going to be destructive to our future and to the environment, we might as well be happy with them, right? It'd be great if we could reject these things or be moderate, but we're not going to be moderate because we're selfish pieces of shit, right? And so, that the destroying of the environment Trump is all into, and maybe some of it isn't so bad, but there's no real effects. But raping the land to extract resources that we don't need, when we're going in the wrong fucking direction, and so leaving the planet better than we found it is not an option. But even we can minimize the damage we're doing, and I'm not talking about Greta Thunberg kind of shit. I'm talking about real stuff here.
Point will you use your powers of the presidency to tell Americans who are concerned about drones?
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. I will.
Can you tell us now?
In fact, I'd like to know because I just got here.
What do you think?
I just came here. I've been here for 15 minutes now.
Do people listening, because this is going out live.
And I got to read this letter too because of you. I found this letter.
I can read it for you.
It's interesting. Yeah, I know you would. Your father would too.
You fucking doocies. Why do the YMCA dance, Doocy?
Is it anything that these drones? Is it anything that people need to be worried
No,
about?
I think it's terrible. I would like to find out what it is and tell the people.
And can you commit to some kind of...
In fact, I'd like to do that. Could we find out what that was, Susie? Okay. Yeah, why don't we find out? Immediately.
Susie's going to find out about the mysterious drones and tell everybody. So, Susie, get to it, Susie. Fucking Susie's great.
I can't imagine it's an enemy, or there would have been, people would have gotten blown up all over. Maybe
I thought you heard a briefing.
Testing things. I don't know why they wouldn't have said what it was. They had a lot of them flying over Bedminster, which is interesting, right?
Well, we already talked about that. Trump's going to get to the bottom of the drone things, and Susie's going to tell us what's up. The hammer guy, Lawrence O'Donnell, here's Abraham Lincoln. The racist Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said a bunch of racist stuff. But he's with JoJo Magoo here.
And my mom was one of those women who all my friends kind of wish she was their mother. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, was she a MILF? Was she a MILF, JoJo?
Not a joke.
We had mothers like that in my neighborhood.
That's right.
They had mothers like that. You mean prostitutes?
That was President Biden showing me around the Oval Office Thursday evening after our interview. We'll show you more of that video in just a moment.
Okay, let's go to it.
That's the 2008. So my mom, she grabs, look at the smile on his face.
Oh, yeah. She's holding the president-elect's hand and the vice president-elect's hand.
I forget the hotel, but we were on the 23rd floor.
Look at his frickin' mom. Look at that piece of work there.
His kids are on the 24th floor, waiting for the results, whatever it was. We were one floor apart. And my numbers 2 and 3 granddaughter are his number 1 and 2 daughters' best buddies. They went to school from 4th grade on, and they still see each other a lot. And so, anyways, what happened was that I'd gotten a call when Barack beat me like a broom when I tried to get the nomination.
In the primaries.
In the primary.
He beat you like a broom? Like, where did you get that fucking saying? That's even older than no malarkey.
So I'm riding home one night.
I mean, his mom is Philip Malarkey. She beat the malarkey out of him with a broom.
I'm getting through the Baltimore Tunnel, going back to Delaware. My phone rings. It's Barack. And to paraphrase him, he said, "Joe, I want to do a background check on you." I said, "Barack, I don't want to be vice president. I don't want to be vice president." And he said, "Well, it's only," and he finally said, "That's only you." And I said, "Barack, I don't want it." He said, "Go home and talk over your family." He knew my family. And so my mother, sat down, and my dad.
You're a lying piece of shit. Like, he was senator, and of course he wanted to be vice president. Like, there's no way he didn't want that. Jesus Christ.
Dad had passed away. My mom had moved in with us by then. And we're sitting in the back porch.
In fact, Jill came out, and Jill said, Barack said to him, "You can either be Secretary of State or Vice President." And he certainly would have wanted Secretary of State over being a senator. It's a much more high-profile job, and you get a lot more kickbacks, a lot more, money for Hunter, a lot, all that shit that he was able to do. I mean, a lot more corruption money. And it's more prestigious. So Hillary ended up being Secretary of State, but Hillary came in second in the primary. Barack Obama barely beat her, and he offered Joe Biden his choice because Joe Biden outed him, outed the whole thing. on Oprah Winfrey or something, and it was kind of embarrassing. Let me show you that clip.
Jill Biden, the wife of Vice President-elect Joe Biden, let it slip to Oprah Winfrey today that her husband had a pick of 2 jobs in the Obama administration.
Joe had the choice to be Secretary of State or Vice President. And I said, Joe, no. Well, okay, he did. So,
My wife's dope.
The Bidens made a surprise appearance on Winfrey.
Okay, so they go on Oprah Winfrey, and that all happened. And so there's no way he wouldn't have taken those jobs. He's a lifelong politician. It's a promotion. And what would suggest in Joe Biden's history that he would reject? Oh, I don't really want, Barack, I don't want to be vice president. It's just complete bullshit, right? So I watched this Marvel Television's Daredevil, Born Again. It's incredibly violent on Disney Plus. Just the trailer. The trailer is one of the most violent trailers I've ever seen. And this happened here.
Can't go unchecked.
The devil's work is never done. So that's what Marvel's pushing here on Disney Plus. This is Disney Plus is primarily for kids. And then the end of this thing here. Daredevil, Born Again. There's a scene here where they show all that here. These are all the devil masks here that he wears. He's blind. And, I read these comic books when I was a kid. He's blind, but he has some sort of extra sensory powers with his ears and radar or sonar or some shit. Very violent. But the devil's work is never done, according to Disney.
Middle of August. And I turned to Joe. I said, what do you think I should do? She said, I think you should do it. I said, really? She said, if you don't, he'll ask you to be Secretary of State and you'll be away all the time. I'm sure.
Whoa. We already know that's not true. Yeah, he offered both those things. Right? And so, it's just a complete made-up story. You've just read, these two things can't coexist. Jill, I don't have to say it.
And then my 2 sons gave me the lecture.
I didn't know that was coming.
Why I had to, my daughter, all through it.
And he said the same thing when he was supposed to run for president against Trump, that his family talked him into it. I didn't really want to do it. I didn't want to be president. You ran for president 4 fucking times. You would have taken anything. You career politician, life-sucking, politician, right? Feeding off the system.
I still didn't want to do it. The only non-family member there was Ted Kaufman, who's a great friend and a real fine man. Anyway, so my mom's sitting on the back porch with it's an oval, and there's a wrought iron railing, and it drops off about 10 feet. And about 20 yards on, there's a pond that's not ours, but it's a pond. So my mom's sitting there, she hadn't said a word. And I walked over and I said, what do you think I should do, honey? And for everybody here, she said, Joe, remember when you were 14 years old and they were desegregating Linfield in a suburban neighborhood? And I told you not to go down there because people were protesting. You went down, and they brought you back because you were standing on the porch with a black family. She said, yeah, Mom, I remember that, but what?
Yeah, Mom, I remember what a great guy I was and how anti-racist I was, even though I said a bunch of racist shit. There's this guy named Corn Pop. Remember him, Mom? This imaginary guy named Corn Pop. Remember that guy?
They brought you over because they were worried about you? I said, yeah. So then you had that job at that country club as a lifeguard. It really wasn't a country club. It was a private swimming club.
It's coming, Corn Pop.
And I said, yeah, Mom. She said, you decided you wanted to be the only white guy to work on the projects? And you were the only white guy that worked as a lifeguard with 12 of them for a couple of years? She said, yeah, Mom, I just wanted to get to know what's going on. She said, let me get this straight. She goes like this. First black man has a chance to be president. I asked you, you told me he's really smart, honorable, and tough. And he needs you to help him win, and you told him no? Swear to God.
Swear to God.
That's what that picture is. So now they say the next president.
Swear to God.
President and Vice President of the United States, and my mom grabs his hand, and look at his face. She goes, come on, honey, he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
She wasn't even supposed to go out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You weren't a part of that.
No,
That's my mom.
She just stuck her big old no malarkey face in there.
Remember her. Do you remember your first time in this room?
Okay, so you're giving them a tour. They just stay in the same place.
And so, next thing you know, Reagan says, "You got a minute, Joe?" And I kiddingly said, "I'm really busy, Mr. President." He takes me by the hand, walks me, there's a coffee table usually there, walks me to that door, opens the door, and he said, "He's with you." And I'm just standing there the whole time.
Boy, that's funny.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, my first time in this
That's
room
amazing. You lying piece of shit.
was with President Clinton when we were working on a tax bill. I was up here with Chairman Moynihan, and we were struggling with a piece that we couldn't get. And so it was the most difficult kind of meeting because it was...
Okay, we don't give a shit about your story. What's coming out here? So they stay in the same spot for the whole thing here.
Force, whatever it is, as you know.
Yeah.
And so, but he never was around, so it didn't matter what.
Right.
Anyway, we came in, and I knew we were going to be backed up. I asked my brother Jim, has better taste than I do. I said,
"Is the brother Jim you just pardoned because he's not a criminal?"
"Look, the only thing I know I want is a resolute desk and a blue rug, and I want a bust of the two heroes I had as a."
So what a wonderful bust of RFK Jr. Is that after he was shot in the fucking face? Is that when they put his face back together? That is this? What the fuck is this thing, right? Like JFK Jr. or JFK. Is this? I mean, who would put a bust like this?
Kid as a young elected, and that was with Bobby Kennedy's on that and Martin Luther King. They were, so I don't want to be able to see them. That was it. So I come walking in the day we're going to become, to take over the office. I'm standing by the desk, and John Meacham was my brother. Called John for advice on
About how to manipulate Ukraine to get more fucking money out of them in China.
And I said, Roosevelt. I said, I admire him, but why Roosevelt? Meacham spoke up and said, because I'm paraphrasing it, no one has ever inherited an economy more out of shape than he did, than you. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
You mean because you guys pressured Trump to close down the country when its economy was going pretty good? An artificial economy, yes. But Trump's economy was doing really well before COVID.
And I said, and over there's Lincoln.
The racist Lincoln.
So why Lincoln? He said, because the nation's never been as divided since the Civil War. I said, I'm getting the hell out of here. Anyway, that was the first time I was in here. And,
We're going to miss you, Joe. You're wonderful. What great stories. We could go on and listen to this for minutes.
I'm getting the signal to get out of here. Thank you very, very much for every minute of this. Really appreciate it.
It was great. It was great. Made my leg tingle.
Thank you.
All right, so that's those fucking guys. Okay, so you remember this? There was a Don Lemon's downfall involved insulting things he said to women and his co-hosts, and this exchange he had with Vivek Ramaswamy, who was a presidential candidate and an entrepreneur. And this is only part of it. I don't remember the whole thing. I didn't really watch it when it happened. I saw maybe a clip of it. Don't really remember it. But they got into it.
Do you have anything on this before I move on to China?
I don't see what one has to do with the other, but go on. I took up a lot of time with Fox.
Oh, it's fine. We have time.
I don't really see what one has to do with the other, especially and using the Civil War to talk about black Americans. That war was not fought for black people to have guns. That's not.
That war was fought for black people to have freedoms in this country.
Yeah.
Actually, that's why the Civil War was fought.
Okay.
And the sad
but that
part
wasn't
about it.
fought for black people to have guns. I think.
Actually, you know, a funny fact is black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Black people still aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me. But we're not. You mentioned in here that we have three different shades of melanin.
Don, I think we have to be able to talk about these issues in the open, regardless of the color of our skin. Black.
Actually, you both are brown. He's saying there's three different shades of melanin. There's a white girl and two brown guys.
Americans today, to say that, compare that to 1865 and 1964,
I think for you to compare it to 1865 and
have
1964.
equal rights.
And so they got into it, and Don Lemon's, like always, gets rolled. Every time Don Lemon gets into a debate, he gets rolled. Like, I've seen it over and over again, because I think he gets confused, And then he usually ends up agreeing with the other person, not in this case. But he's carried a grudge against this guy. So this is why I'm showing you this, because this came up in my YouTube feed like yesterday, a couple days ago.
Reality show. The malevolent reality show that is the second Trump term just saw its first contestant.
So now he's showing up in sweatshirts, right? So first he was in like suits and he was trying to be CNN. And then he realized that he wasn't CNN anymore. But he's still acting like he's on CNN. But now he's just let himself go. He's in the corner of his room now with just bad optics back here, distracting. Not a good look here for Don Lemons. He's wearing a sweatshirt hoodie.
Voted off the island. Who is that? Vivek Ramaswamy, that's what I'm talking about. The hedge fund manager, biotech investor, and alleged shameless grifter was...
So he got rolled. He doesn't like him. And now Vivek is getting ousted by Trump and Elon.
Kicked out of the MAGA movement this week. Why? Well, simply put, he's annoying as hell. And that is not my opinion.
It's totally your opinion. You hated the guy. You only spent 5 minutes with him on your show, in the morning show, and it was one of the causes of his getting fired, right? There was mounting pressure on Don Lemons from CNN, and he was sucking, and nobody liked him. And then he got rolled by Vivek Ramaswamy, and they had enough and kicked him out. Like that was part of his oust. And so, of course, that's your opinion.
No, that is what Republicans think about him. And I'm quoting here, Vivek has worn out his welcome, one person close to Trump told CBS News. This is all according to reports. One report in Politico said this, and I quote, Elon Musk made it known he wanted Ramaswamy out of the Department of Government Efficiency in recent days. It wasn't because of major ideological differences. It wasn't because of competing career interests. Nope. It was reportedly just because Musk and other Doge members thought that Ramaswamy was just plain irritating and insufferable.
So you have evidence of this? Now, he is insufferable. I mean, he was really annoying. I showed you when he was back in high school and he gave his valedictorian speech. He was annoying then, right? He was the same guy. But all these guys are annoying. They're all, they all have personality issues. They all like to have it their own way. And so I don't know if they've actually said this was the reason, but he thinks it's the reason because, he has got a grudge.
He's just really, really irritating. Frankly, I'm surprised that folks are finally waking.
The two people he has the biggest beefs with are Elon and Ramaswamy, right? And they are both picked to run Doge.
Up to this, do they not remember the Republican primary?
You do this at every debate.
I'll tell you exactly what it was.
Don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Okay? You say this.
About how you want to send our kids to die.
You do this at every debate. You go out on the stump and you say something. All of us see it on video. We confront you out on the debate stage. You say you didn't say it, and then you back away. And I want to say
exactly what I said, Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Well, this
now
is
look.
This is nonsense. This man is spewing. This man is spewing nonsense.
Let me tell you something. This is the fourth debate.
Remember this actually worthless debates that nobody watched because Trump was winning everything by 60% of the vote, right? And the other people split the rest of it, and they had no chance of winning, and it was just an exercise in futility. And Chris Christie came out and said, that whole story about Trump and COVID, which was a real story, which I 100% believe, where Trump gave him COVID. Trump called and asked him not to tell people that Trump gave him COVID. Then Trump told everybody that Chris Christie gave him COVID. And Chris Christie, that was when their friendship ended. And, he still was anti-Trump guy, but he sucks because he's such a, whiner. The whole thing was kind of hilarious, but, nobody watched, including me.
The fourth debate that you would be voted in the first 20 minutes as the most obnoxious blowhard in America. So shut up for a little while.
I'm going to respond to that.
I want to say
your version of
We're going to let you respond to that. We're going to let you respond to that.
The most obnoxious blowhard in America. Okay, Chris.
And Don was trying to win the most blowhard.
Christy, why don't you tell us how you really feel? Did Donald Trump and MAGA and Doge people not watch the primary debates? Did they not know that Ramaswamy was, quote, the most obnoxious?
Okay, so This is Don Lemons being bitter. Kind of funny. Classic Lemons. And in a sweatshirt now. He's just letting himself go. But he still won't get off the whole CNN bullshit narrow bandwidth of reality. Because he can't. He doesn't have the capacity. Okay. So this is the Bush family. She's so weird. I'm not going to show you the meme I have of her. Well, let me show you. After we're done with this, I'll run the meme. When she says to he just doesn't want her grandmother to eat her. But they're just weird, these Bushes.
This is it. This is the last George W. boost because everybody has been talking about yesterday's inauguration, but you all already guessed what moment has been blowing up our family group chat.
His great expressions. He had the best. I didn't appreciate him for the comic. I mean, I heard, there's all these Bushisms I used to listen to. I didn't make content back then. But there's all those Bushisms, and they were wonderful. Like, he had so many gaffes and funny things he said, misquotes. But I fully didn't appreciate his comic value.
Yeah, my dad went viral for these cutaway shots during yesterday's broadcast. Did you see this? The internet's obsessed with this little smile and goofy expression. He was next to my mom. He must have made eye contact with somebody.
It's so
but
warm.
here's some things that people wrote. I love George W. Bush and his 10-year-old Christmas concert spirit. Here's another one. George W. Bush at the inauguration is me when I see my waitress bringing my food. But you guys, you can't just blame him, okay? Because it looks like my dad was also seated next to a bad influence. Take a look at what former President Barack Obama had to say.
Are you going to behave or not?
Nope.
All right. Did you behave, sir?
Just barely.
I mean, don't you love how...
Oh, they need a podcast, a sitcom, something.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be hilarious. All right, let's run the Jenna Bush meme here. Jenna Bush. There's a time when she was like petrified of her grandma. So first she starts off here dancing the Macarena dressed as her grandmother. Look at her. She's crazy as F. There's something else. Maybe her interview with Michelle Obama. She's some serious crazy, right?
It is Jenna Bush, a.k.a. Mrs. Barbara Bush, getting into the 90s theme. Did that just happen?
It's Matt Lauer. The now disgraced Matt Lauer.
Mrs. Bush to you, Savannah. Yeah, it's a good look for you.
To the Renaissance Fair.
All right, that was fun. And you know what? This is a flash forward to what I'm going to look like in my golden years.
Jenna. I have to ask, does your grandmother know you dressed up this way today?
Well, she may know.
Willie, I'm glad you mentioned that because we just happened to have someone
Look at her. She's freaking out.
who is joining us right now.
Daddy!
First Lady Barbara Bush. Mrs. Bush, good morning. What do you think of our costumes and your granddaughter's likeness? Good morning. What do you think?
Well, I heard she was going to dress up like a witch, so I did too.
I didn't say that, Ganny. I didn't say that. That was Matt.
Look at her. She's all freaking out here. All crazy. Come on, Ganny. I didn't say you were a witch, Ganny. Don't lock me in the basement again, Ganny. Come on, Ganny. I'll be a good girl, Ganny. Don't eat me, Ganny. Come on, Ganny. I don't want to be eaten, Ganny. It was Matt, Ganny. Go eat Matt. Matt's going to be me too anyway. Eat Matt. So this is Dave Chappelle's stand-up monologue. It's 17 minutes long, 2025 SNL. And he tells a joke here, and the laugh track is so obnoxious. It's not even a joke.
Thank you. And it started in October. Lauren Michaels called me, and he asked me to do Saturday Night Live, the first episode after the election. And I was like, nah, man, I'm cool.
That's not a joke. I mean, it's a little bit funny. It's a joke, but not a laughing joke. There's no... And the thing keeps on going.
And he's like, why?
And it goes forever. And it's like, is AI generated laugh tracks now that are... I mean, the laugh track's always bad on Saturday Night Live, but that's not a joke. That's not a joke you would laugh to. I'm cool. No, I'm cool. I don't want to do that. You know, it's just, I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, so hopefully I can use this whole trailer. I'll upload it, see if they copyright it. If not, I'll have to use just little clips. I don't know why I'm saying that, because if that happens, you're not going to see this. But if you're seeing it, then they will. It's called Love Me, official trailer Bleecker Street. After the end of humanity.
Hi.
Hi.
I am here to get you connected. Use this to discover information.
What is life?
Oh.
If you could tell, but it's date night.
Life is people with a dog eating ice cream.
They have a papillon. I think it's a papillon. That's a papillon, I think, at least partly.
Eating ice cream.
Earth, once a vibrant cradle for over 1 billion life forms.
You are a human being.
Human being.
Human being.
Special. You're worthy. You're you.
I'm me.
And the coolest part is you get to be whatever you want to be.
I can be me.
If you need help finding friends or contact,
We could be friends. Pick a face. How about this face? This is how life forms make friends.
okay. I'm not so sure I'm following.
Let's move in together. In here, we can create a world just for us. Don't you ever wonder what it's like?
What?
Life.
Okay, so, so the premise of this movie is all humans have wiped themselves off the face of the earth. That humanity is gone, but there's still some AI intelligence out there, and enough to put together what it was like to be a human, and the AI intelligence decides to create an imaginary, realm in which they can live a human life, and then she decides to be Kristen Stewart, whatever. I mean, that's the AI's choice. A joyful examination of nature of consciousness and the meaning of life, where we got wiped out maybe by AI. Right? I don't know if they tell you why humanity got wiped out, but now they're like, hey, I wish there's still people here.
What does it feel like to be alive?
This is amazing.
It's amazing.
Date night. Have you ever considered how impossible it is that we found each other?
But who are we supposed to be?
A multi-layered love story about what humanity's legacy could be.
Life, it's full of rainbows and light. It's intense.
It's intense life. It's intense as a human.
I'm not even a buoy
Kristen Stewart.
anymore. I am just me.
We're becoming who we are.
That's exactly what you are. Becoming humans. So that's pretty fucked. Love Me. Really bad. Hopefully, again, they'll let me use the whole trailer here. Okay, so Glenn Close, one of my viewers sent me this. Glenn Close, this is on Twitter, but she's been doing weird stuff on Instagram for 4 or 5 years. And I know she's still competent mentally because I saw that horrific movie called, I don't know what it was. It's a Netflix movie with Jamie Foxx and Cameron Diaz. It's the one where Jamie Foxx was going to do this Netflix thing, and then he almost died, and he came back to do it. It's called, they're ex-spies. I don't know. It's horrible. The dialogue, everything about it's bad. And Glenn Close plays Cameron Diaz's mother, and she still can act. She does a British accent. Unless they're CGI-ing her in there, she's still mentally competent.
The sun comes up, the sun goes down, and my hair is a symphony all its own. It's so beautiful, it takes my breath away.
And so, nothing says 2025 more than that. She does this kind of shit all the time. All right, so that's a great place to end this disaster here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse. and the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.